Okay, so now, why don't you ask me some questions that come up for your discussion during lunch.
You're going to do it.
If anything came up.
One question that came up for,
Yes.
for me
Yes.
is like, we're talking a lot about single point meditation,
Yes.
concentration, and
Yes.
that we have to do it in a way that we identify like what is the difference between belief and
No,
trust.
no. Okay, so finish your question. I'll try and make the point again. It's not quite clear.
Or to,
Okay.
yeah, and I was wondering, like, because I guess there are different ways of one can do a single point
There are different ways of what?
method.
Different ways of what?
I can do the meditation to learn to improve my way on being in a single point of concentration. I was thinking, what suggestions or what ways are there? Is it good to
Okay, I still think from your question and from somewhere else, there's still not clarity about exactly what single pointed concentration is. Okay. If you're in a room of 100 people all chatting away, and you're dying to know what they're all saying, well, that's our mind. Except it's probably 1,000 thoughts, not just 100. You got that point? So in other words, we don't focus. Normally, in a normal day, we do focus on driving the car, doing all the jobs we've learned, but we don't have any awareness of what's happening in our mind. Do you accept that? And it's only when it's very strong that we're freaking out and pay attention. But then we tend to think it's normal just from the time we wake up until the time we go to sleep to have thoughts non-stop. Would you agree with that? So we just think that's normal, don't we? We really believe that's normal. All our psychological models, Freud, Jung, it's just normal to have a crazy, uncontrolled mind. Would you agree? That's what we think. Do you accept that? What do you mean?
I don't know their theories, but maybe.
What? What do you mean?
I've not studied Freud, so I don't know.
I'm not asking you about Freud. I'm asking about your own mind, your own thoughts. Do you
Yeah.
realise your mind's uncontrolled?
Yes.
And we consider it normal.
Mm-hmm.
Do you understand? And would you agree that we don't seem to have methods in our psychological models of how to steady those thoughts? Would you agree with that?
I don't know. I cannot say because I don't know.
But what you've picked up in ordinary conversation with people in the world and reading papers and books and just ordinary world, I'm talking not fancy. We just think it's normal to have an uncontrolled mind. Do people agree?
Yes.
And so all Buddha's saying is, no, it's not. It's mental illness, frankly. It's actually mentally ill to have a berserk mind, which is a bit of a surprise to us. So all he's got is, and this is got from the Indians before him, this ability to focus the mind at a very subtle level such that all the thoughts are completely subdued. And when you've accomplished that in meditation, then in your daily life, you're completely happy, you're completely blissful, you see every single thought that's there, you haven't realized emptiness yet, you haven't got bodhicitta, you're not enlightened, but you're a phenomenal being because you've used this skill to completely learn to control the mind so that in ordinary daily life, you'd never get upset, you'd never get angry, you'd never get jealous, you'd never get depressed. They're still there, but they're so subdued. They're so completely controlled. Now that doesn't seem normal for us, does it? Are you sort of hearing in the most simple way what I'm saying? So all this technique is a skill these amazing beings cultivated that is one of the central techniques in Buddhism. That is a simple technique to help you concentrate. Don't even think why yet. Because what we think, don't ask why you're trying to concentrate. It's simply a job, like you're in a room of 100 people and you're all over the place, listening to this one, listening to that one. That's our mind, never stopping. So what you've decided to do is you're going to concentrate on a spot on the wall. So your job is simply to learn to focus on the spot on the wall. Not to make the thoughts go away, not to listen to their conversation, not to work out what they're saying. You're simply learning to concentrate. It's like a really boring, simple thing. You're learning to concentrate on one thing. So the consequence of that, we all know if you've got even some concentration, the consequence of even some concentration, if you're really focused on that book you're reading, suddenly the conversations around you, you don't even hear them, do you? We all had that experience, wouldn't we? So we know we can do it. So you just, that all this skill is to develop that skill, but 1 billion times more subtle, 1 billion times more powerful. So it's the ability to focus on one thing. It's not rocket science, the concept of it. So now you've got to ask the question, oh, that's interesting. Why should I learn to concentrate? Well, first of all, in general daily life, you can't do anything if you can't concentrate, can you? If you start to make a cake and you pick up the egg and then you get distracted, well, you'll never get to the end and make a cake. So we can do this with some things. We can learn to drive a car, we can learn to do lots of things, but we don't have any method for learning to sort out what we're thinking. Do you understand? So that's Buddha's skill. So this technique came from these Indians. He uses that, but the reason he says you need some concentration is so that you go to the second mode of meditation, and it's called developing insight. You understand? There's millions of things you can develop, but essentially, in a simple, ordinary, day-to-day way of thinking about it in daily life. Okay, in daily life, don't forget even the word insight, but the more you're able, from 5 minutes every morning, let's say, you're able to focus your mind, which means not follow all the crazy thoughts. You recognize they're there, but you're not following them. You're training your mind to focus. It's simply a learning. You learn to ride a bike. As you keep doing it, you keep getting better at it. You learn to drive a car. You learn to concentrate. It's just a skill. But the benefit that comes from this is immediately, before you get any fancy long-term skills, okay, before you even develop insight into emptiness and all the fancy stuff, what I'm trying to get at is ordinary, practical benefit of beginning to get some concentration in your mind, not focusing on something out here, but you're closing your eyes and you're using your breath. You're just anchoring your mind to the breath. So you bring that skill into your daily life. So you don't need to use it to learn about your mind. You can use it to learn how to play tennis better. But here, your wish is to learn more about your mind. That's why you want to do it in the Buddhist view. So the more concentration you get, then because anyway, incidentally, when you've been watching your breath, your mind's raging on just the same. Do you understand? But it's good, not bad, because you can't help but notice. You can't help but notice, but you're not paying attention. But you can't help hearing them all shouting and yelling. So you already are starting to notice all the crazy thoughts in your mind. But you're not paying attention to them. That's not the job here. It's just to train to concentrate. So now in your daily life, now what's going to happen is you start to become more aware, even as you're doing the dishes. You're not just mindlessly worried and thinking and being anxious, which is how we are most of the time, unconscious, just doing the dishes. And you're noticing the dishes, but even then we're not even noticing half the time. But what's happening now is you're becoming more conscious, not just of the dishes, but you can't help but hear. You're becoming more involved in your thoughts in a conscious, intentional way, because you want to learn to gradually have control over them. That's the goal. So the more you get concentration, the more capable you are, but you've got to do it consciously, intentionally. You want to hear your thoughts more. So you're doing the dishes, and then suddenly this is ordinary life, you know. You're noticing that you're irritated and annoyed because your husband promised he'd do the dishes, and you do them automatically, and then you're suddenly thinking, well, why isn't he doing them? He promised he would, and then you start getting annoyed. I mean, this is life, isn't it? But then because you're more conscious and you want to work with your mind, the virtuous thoughts in you, the wisdom in you, the kindness in you. What's your name? Sandra. Yeah. So of course. So you say, oh, shut up, Sandra. Just give it a break. Do you understand? And then before it has grown into killing your children, you've just cut it at the root, haven't you? And this is so simple, it's embarrassing. You cut it before it gets too strong. Now, if it's really strong, depending on how strong it is, that shows how long you haven't been dealing with it. So in the most ordinary sense, what I'm trying to talk about is ordinary application of this skill is because you decide you want the concentration. Sure, you'll play better tennis as well. But here, it's so that you can become more conscious of all the thoughts in your mind. That's all. It's not rocket science. Are we communicating? Are we communicating? Are we communicating? But you've got to want to do it. You see, you've got to want to do it. Whereas if you're sitting there, but I'm allowed to be angry because he promised he'd do the dishes, then you're not doing the job. You get my point? The reason that you want the focus first, then you're going to be more aware of what's happening in your mind. And then, even without knowing much about Buddhist psychology, we can sort of tell the difference between angry thoughts and happy thoughts, before they get too strong. But that's the hard part, because we don't realize we're angry until it's want to kill your kids, That's simply the skill we're trying to get, is to start to hear, and that's still gross in comparison with the level of subtlety we can get to really hear way much more deep down the level of all these thoughts. You understand? It's practical. So you've got to want to be aware of your thoughts. Now, I mean, even when Western psychology, they say you've got 1,000 thoughts a second. So there's a lot of thoughts. So the best we can do, you've got to have a sincere wish to be watching your mind throughout the day. Do you understand? That's really it. And then what you do with it when you see it. Oh, I'm angry. What do I do now? Well, argue with it, because you're hearing. You see, the thing is, we're so used to thinking that anger is a feeling. But when you're sitting there quietly doing the dishes, there's no real feeling yet. It's just annoyed thoughts. Do you understand? And you notice them at their base. So as the thoughts get stronger, they eventually come out the mouth as emotion. Do you understand? It's only because we haven't noticed them before they got to the mouth. So it's practical. That you've got to want to do this. And second, you've got to want to own the anger. So that often what happens is this. Oh, I'm getting angry. Well, you're really wrong to be angry. Sandra, you're a very naughty girl. You shouldn't be angry. And then you start getting angry about being angry. Now, that's a disaster. That's common. So we've got to be conscious and to try to be positive. So using all our positive voices in there. There's many positive thoughts in there, but we tend to let them just be there. So we have to use those to argue with your crazy thoughts. That's really what it means, simple level of practice day by day by day. And like any job you do, you'll get clearer and better at it as you do it. But it's just hard work. So concentration is simply learning to concentrate, getting better at focusing. Then you're utilizing that focus. So then in the day-to-day life, not to mention formally in meditation, to do some internal analysis. Are we communicating here? So it is not something we don't already do. It's just that this concentration technique, and most of us in this life will not get really good concentration unless you go seriously into the mountains for several years. Do you understand? It's a really intense, we're all capable, but it demands an enormous amount of discipline and effort, and most of us have houses and mortgages and husbands and children, and so it's not possible to do it. We're just totally busy on our rat race. So to really be qualified, you'd have to give up everything. You can turn your back now. If you've got no responsibilities and you can walk out of here today and go to the mountains, most of us aren't that qualified. Do you understand? So that we do what we can every day utilizing this skill. It's simply common sense, that's all. But you have to want to do it. You've got to see the benefit of working on your mind. And this is at a gross level, but already fantastic. So, let's say you're a person who chooses to be a Buddhist, and if you're really serious, then you would study the literature about the way the mind works, which gives you much deeper insight into comprehending the subtleties of all the different thoughts and the characteristic of negative thoughts, the characteristic of positive thoughts. That's much more sophisticated, but that's still the same thing. It's like you can be a simple gardener and you can be a really complicated gardener. You just have to learn more botany. Do you understand? But we start where we are. But you've got to see the benefit of it. You're the beneficiary, not to mention your children. You understand? Not to mention. You've got to realise the benefit to ourselves, not do it out of guilt. Oh, I'm bad, It's because it's for your own sake. You've got to do it for your own benefit. And it doesn't mean it's easy. And it doesn't mean it'll be magic overnight, you'll feel better. No. So, classically speaking, there are two main modes of meditation in Buddhism. One is called, first one, it's known in Sanskrit, you might become familiar with the words, shamatha, which means calm abiding, which is the name given to the result of accomplishing single-pointed concentration. The mindfulness that you learn all around the place, you hear about, it's based on this one. But there are lots of variations in people's opinions about what it is and what to do. You can't help that, it's just people. And that's fine. Then second, the classic name given to the second mode of meditation is called insight or vipassana. So that confuses us because in the world there's a type of Buddha taught many kinds of insight meditations. But the one that's most popular, that's most known, is where you develop where you start to use your concentration, which you get in the first mode. Now you utilize that in the second mode, where you start paying attention to the different sensations in your body. And that's the benefit of this, is to help us realize that things change. Impermanence. It becomes a very experiential understanding of impermanence. But the one we're talking here, the classic one in the tradition we're part of, it's insight into reality, insight into emptiness. And that's much more sophisticated. But in general, the way I'm talking about utilizing it is simply common sense. They call it the method you use to get insight in the second mode of meditation, based on the first mode, concentration. They call it in Tibetan, as you must know from the literature, analytical meditation. Now, that's a fancy 14th century term used by the Tibetans for what we would simply say to think about something. So don't make it fancy. So there you are doing the dishes. Oh, I'm supposed to do analytical meditation. Oh, what does that mean? Well, it just means think, either notice what you're thinking and then counteract it and fix it, or think something through. Let's say you're mad at your husband because he doesn't do the dishes every day, and you're thinking, okay, but let me think this through. All right, I've got anger, which is my problem, and he's a good man, he does other things. So you do some analysis to sort of get yourself just to relax, So we've got to think things through all the time. So the more focus you can get, the better you can think something through. So it's really common sense. But putting it in classic Buddhist terms, it's learning to distinguish between the weeds and the herbs. The ridiculous negative thoughts, the anger, the hurt, the attachment, which are raging on uncontrollably for most of us, quietly sometimes, loud other times. But we've also got kindness and love and compassion and intelligence, but we don't often pay attention to those. So we've got to learn to really be the more you learn botany, the more you have concentration in your garden, the more you can see the difference between all these little green growing things. You get better and better at identifying. That comes from understanding the mind more and more from using Buddhist model. So all of this is implying learning about the thoughts and feelings themselves, not the object of them. The child, the husband, the car, that's how normally we tend to think. He did this and he did that and she said this and it's not fair and how dare she do this and why do they say that and I didn't. It's obsessive and unhappy and always about the object of our feelings. So here we've got to learn the skill of trying to observe the feelings, the thoughts, the conceptual stories themselves and try to adjust them. That's ordinary application of, as Lama Yeshe puts it, being your own therapist. So the more conscious we are of what's going on in here, the more we can learn to be in control of it all. We tend to allow the thoughts to come and go, like as if they're pulling us along like this, like as if we have no control. But the more we realize they're my thoughts, the more we realize that I can change them. I can change them, And why should I? Because, for my sake, become less neurotic, more happy, more content, more courageous. And then indeed, kinder to your children, presumably. So it's not complicated. It's just that when you read Buddhist literature, because the words are like 2,000 years old and 1,000 years old, we mystify it. We can't hear it as practical, So, there's also lots of other ways they talk about applying these mindfulness. One of the big ways of talking about mindfulness, and this is a valid technique as well, in your meditation, let's say you've done your concentration, or in your daily life, how you would apply it is to try and not have too many judgmental opinions. Because basically, the negative thoughts are judgmental opinions, either about yourself or someone else. You read the paper and you hear about that particular country. How dare they do, these evil people, blah, blah, blah. Then you read about Mr. Trump. Then you read about some rapist. Then you read about the next door neighbour. Then you think about your friends at work, always criticising, what we call judgment. So judgment is fine. Saying that there's a war in Syria doesn't mean that's bad. It might be a fact. That's not a judgment. But getting angry about it and blaming people, that's the part that's a drag. So one practice is not to do any analysis of it, but merely shut up and stop having opinions. Just observe. Okay, or even in your own mind. One practice could be you're seeing all this powerful emotion flowing through you. So one practice would be based on some concentration. Okay, that's anger, or there's jealousy, and you let it come and let it go. You don't discuss it. You don't have a conversation with it. So there's different approaches, different things it's good to do. Sometimes if you're doing the dishes, and as I said, you might think it through logically to come to a conclusion because you're sick of this constant resentment because he doesn't do the dishes, and you come to a firm conclusion, okay, let it go, just relax. Or sometimes you just say to yourself, shut up, Sandra. You know, there's anger. Let it come, let it go. And start having a conversation. Because what happens is thoughts come, and then we write a novel. Before you finish, you've written a novel about it because you can't stop. So even just simply let it come, let it go. That's a good, and that's very much the Mahamudra meditation approach. Mahamudra meditation, or the Dzogchen approach, and a bit similar to the Zen approach, is your object of concentration isn't the breath. The object of focus is your mind. That means, and that's initially quite weird because you think, what am I concentrating on? You can't kind of pinpoint something. But whatever thought arises in your mind, you simply focus on that. And then, of course, there's no analysis. You're noticing it's anger. And then so sometimes your mind might calm down, which is very nice. But as Lama Yeshe said, even if you're getting really turbulent, really upset, your mind can't quieten down. You're seeing your delusions, you're seeing your anger. He said even that is good. You simply observe it and not go into a conversation with it. Do you understand? So it's like when we're not conscious, we're completely identifying. We're like this. We're like swimming in it, and it's completely tensing us up and relaxing us, and we're not conscious of anything. So we've got to become more conscious, literally more conscious of what the hell is going on between our ears all day. You understand? And of course, in the beginning, it's a bit shocking. I mean, they even say, like I said in the texts, that one of the signs of success from the first of this 9 stages of this cultivation of concentration, and most of us won't get anywhere near even accomplishing the first of the 9. And that's not being rude, because you've got to be in a very particular environment to get serious development in this skill, but we can get something. Even the first level, the sign of success is that you think you're getting worse. Because naturally, it's like I said, you're overweight and no muscle tone, you feel fine. But then you go to the gym, you come home on the first day, you've never felt worse. But you know it's a good pain, because now you're noticing all the work that has to get done. It's like that. So you've got to have courage to do that, because part of our problem is, and this is where I think we have to talk about attachment, part of our problem is we can't stand, when we've really got lots of emotions going on and bad things are happening in our life, we can't stand the pain. We just wish it would all go away. It's unbearable for us. So to think of delving into it and understanding it more just seems too horrible. Do you understand? So we'll do anything to make it go away. So this is what we have to learn to understand a little bit the Buddhist view of this simple, ordinary, daily word attachment. I mean, everybody in this room, I don't know if we use that word in our daily life if we're not Buddhist, but it's something, you'd say, oh, she's really attached to her family. And we mean by that something good, that she's close to her family. Fantastic. But when Buddha says the word attachment, don't think it's the same meaning. And we know you can have one word that has different meanings. So we've got to get clear what Buddha means by attachment. It's really, really specific. And if we misunderstand it, then just like Lama Zopa said, when we hear that Buddha says you've got to give up attachment, because we misunderstand the word and we think it means something good, then we think, oh, you mean I've got to give up my heart? I've got to give up my happiness? No, so we've got to know what he means by it. And that's why this very specific approach in Buddhist psychology is very specific to Buddhism. It's not the way we think normally. He makes this clear distinction between the neurotic, unhappy, deluded, miserable states of mind, and I want to describe these now more in detail and their characteristics, and those and the virtuous ones. Like I said, we tend to think a normal person has a bit of anger, a bit of depression, a bit of anxiety, and a bit of love and compassion. Hopefully more of the good than the bad. But we don't seem to think we have much control over it. Whereas Buddha's expertise is this. He says we can radically change our mind, get rid of the rubbish and grow the goodness. So that implies the key job we have to learn by learning the Buddhist view, if we choose to, is how to distinguish between a so-called negative thought and negative emotion. And don't hear that in a moralistic way. It's not judgment. And a positive one. It's a very specific Buddhist approach, you know. So the Buddha's saying that okay, I like to say it like this. If we look at these unhappy states of mind, in particular these, not the positive ones. And the way Buddha describes it, this is my way of saying it, there's like a hierarchy. You know, and just the first couple, they talk about the three main unhappy states of mind. You know, if you read Buddhist books, the term that's commonly used in English is the translation of the Sanskrit word klesha, which is often translated as affliction, which is a very medieval word. I don't know in your language, in Swiss German, whether you have what's an equivalent word in Swiss German for affliction?
Yeah.
What do they use for affliction? You don't even know. What's the German for it? What word do you use for the neuroses in German? In Swiss German or German? You don't know. Well, you have to know. It's the most basic thing in Buddhism. What? What, darling?
The German speakers don't have this.
Wenn es Blendung ist, dann haben wir das nicht.
She said if it's an affliction, then the German speakers don't have any.
Oh, what's it say? Affliction.
The
The dictionary says Elend. Elend oder Leiden oder Gebrechen.
But that's suffering.
This is suffering. So you see, that's okay, good enough. I mean, that's the meaning of the word, affliction. But, you know, okay, that's the typical word that all the Tibetans, if you read His Holiness the Dalai Lama and the Tibetans, they use the one term in Tibetan, which is a translation of the word klesha. Now, but there's many words, you know, you can use to try and convey it. I mean, you know, anyway, let's just look at this category of states of mind, the neurotic ones. Buddha would have liked that term, I think. Another word they use is deluded, which is a very unusual, which is good in English. So I'll explain. But the key thing about these states of mind, the Buddha says, which is sort of evident to us, they feel terrible. I mean, it's just so simple, you know. That's what they call afflictions. You know, it's like a sickness. You feel terrible. I mean, check the last time you were depressed. Jealous. Simple words. Don't use fancy psychological terms like bipolar or something. Just use ordinary words, you know. It feels terrible. It's sort of so blazingly obvious. But because we think it's normal, then we don't kind of question, you know. And then, of course, we blame somebody else for it, that kind of thing. So the main one of these, the one that Buddha would refer to as the root problem, as you know, if you studied any Buddhism at all, you'll know it's called, you know, this term, it's known colloquially as ego grasping. Ego grasping. It's like a very, Buddha's saying it's a very deeply ingrained, deeply instinctive, fear-based, unhappy kind of sense of a separate, concrete me. And it's not a happy feeling. And it's very instinctive. This is where Buddha diverged eventually from all the Hindus in relation to his own personal experiential findings about the nature of self. So this is the deepest of the problems. Okay? That gives rise to, then, effectively, the main problem in daily life. And this is not how we think in the world. This is Buddha's view. And that state of mind is called attachment. So it's, like I say, it's multifaceted. At the most primordial level, at a feeling level, you know, this attachment actually is that experience of never feeling I am not enough. I do not have enough. And then no matter what you get, it is never enough. It's an aching feeling of dissatisfaction, deep, deep, deep down, very instinctive. This is the energy of attachment. Now the Buddha would say, of course, that's because we've practiced it for so long in the past, and we bring it with us. Look at the world. We can see some people never satisfied, always miserable, always something. No matter, they're ones always the glass is half full. You know, some people we can see even if their life is crummy, even if they have bad things, they're more easily content. They're more satisfied, therefore more joyful. It's something very deep inside us. So all of us have got this dissatisfaction though. So naturally, the next level of attachment from this deep energy of dissatisfaction, obviously you feel you're missing something. So naturally you have to search for something to get it, to fill up the hole. This is the gross, obvious, day-to-day application of this problem Buddha calls attachment. So then naturally, the first obvious things we look for are the objects of our five senses. Food is a typical one. You know, things to look at, things to hear, to do with the body. So we can see certain objects, and we've all got different habits. Some people become attached to food, attached to having a beautiful body, attached to other bodies, attached to things, attached to money. I mean, attachment is limitless in its capacity to find something out there. So then the next job of attachment, this hungry, it's like an emotional hunger, you know, always hungry for something. Really what it is. So then you look for the object based upon your personality, it'll be a certain object, you know. So then when we start to look at our mind, we start to notice our mind, become much more conscious. You know, if we say attachment to food, and that's pretty typical for most of us. You know, food's kind of a normal one. And I'm not talking about the ordinary need to have food to be healthy. I'm talking about, and this is one of the key jobs of attachment, it over-exaggerates. That's its key job. What attachment does, coming from this emotional hunger, it over-exaggerates the deliciousness of the object. And then next one is, you think about it all the time. Now we know this. We know this. So, you know, when the attachment's very severe, and lots of people have, like you're really attached to jumping on girls, you know. I mean, think about it. I mean, that must be horrible. It's unbelievable pain. You're thinking about girls all the time. You're thinking about sex all the time. You're thinking about food all the time. You're thinking about your body all the time. The shape, and we all do that. We're all obsessed with our body, you know. No matter what size, your breasts, big, small, you're never happy. This way, your lips, never happy. Ear this way, that way, never happy. We know this. So the energy of attachment at a deep level is dissatisfaction. And it's usually, I'm not enough. And I don't have enough. So then naturally you hunger. Well, if I get this, and if I get that, and if I get this, then I'll be satisfied. So then all this is attachment energy. And then it exaggerates the object. Then you manipulate to get it. And then you expect to get the result. So this is attachment. And when it comes to people, especially relationships, it's absolutely massive, you know. And of course we call it normal, but I think what we mean by normal is that if you didn't have it, you'd be abnormal. That's why we never think, I should try and change it. We just think, well, I'm born this way, what to do? So then when you do have a very obsessive attachment, what if, say, you know, like you're attached to having sex with little girls, then of course you're ashamed, you're freaking out, you do it in secret, you don't tell anybody because you don't want to be judged. But your mind never stops. Or even horrible things like torture. One of my friends on death row in Kentucky, my Buddhist friend, Mitch, he's there, and he's one of the other guys whom I know. He's very quiet. Mitch said, Robina, he thinks about torture all day. Now forget that that's negative. There's no doubt why he's on death row. But excuse me, just think about his mind. Look, we think about food all day. That's bad enough. I mean, try and think that you'd want to torture people all day, or jump on little girls all day, or kill all day. I mean, this is the human mind, you know. And then, of course, in our world, we don't know why. So you try to pretend it's not there. You push it away. You can't. You go crazy. Because we don't have methods to help us work with our mind or even understand why we have all these thoughts. You know? Okay, Buddhism's got the explanation of karma. It's another whole discussion. So attachment is obsessive, thinks about the object all the time. You can't stop it. We can see it. You know, it's deeply habitual. But the worst part of attachment, and this is the point that Buddha's making. So there's this primordial, wrong, neurotic sense of a separate I, which is so deep we can't even see that one. It gives rise to this hunger, this neediness, this dissatisfaction. But then all the time wanting this, hoping to get this, if only this, maybe that. Then there's these expectations that when I get it, I will feel satisfied. I'll feel happy. But the saddest part, Buddha says, is when we do get the cake, get the body, get the thing, there's a little bit of happiness, but then it doesn't last. And you've got to eat the cake again tomorrow. So we're like bottomless pits. So yeah, it's normal insofar as we've all got it. But all Buddha's saying is he's found some methods to help us understand it, unpack it, and gradually, with lots of practice, get rid of it. Because it all comes down to the mind. It's all deep, deep, old, habitual thoughts. Very subtle. So then on the basis of attachment, when it doesn't get what it wants, the next one is the actual name of the state of the mind, which is the response when attachment doesn't get what it wants, or it gets what it doesn't want. It's called aversion. So these are fundamental, and we spend our day between these two. So because we're always needy, emotionally hungry, we're always looking for something, the nice sound, the nice smell, the nice word, the nice taste, the nice behavior from the children, the nice dishes clean, whatever, always there. And then 1,000 times a day, because it's always there, it won't get what it wants. The kids talk too loud. The hubby doesn't do the dishes. And then an aversion will arise instantaneously. So mild versions of aversion: annoyed, irritated, upset, frustrated. We say this all the time, and we don't think it's a problem. You don't go to your therapist because you get annoyed. Sort of shut up and go home. You might go to your therapist if you get really annoyed and it causes anger and you want to kill your children. Then you'd better do something about it. But we don't notice it or even think it's a problem until it's really severe. So basically, ego grasping, the root problem that informs everything. On the basis of that, this constant emotional hunger, it's very subtle as well as quite gross. Always wanting something, always looking for something, always expecting something, and then when we get it, we possess it. And then all these expectations, and then what it does is it exaggerates the object. So if I'm in love with my latest boyfriend, whoever that is, let's say who's my boyfriend? I don't know who's my boyfriend today. What's your name? Who?
Peter.
Peter.
Yes.
If I'm in love with Peter, let's say, attached to Peter. So I'm looking for who's going to make me happy because I feel empty. Then my eyes go into that shape. Then I start, attachment writes this story about Peter, doesn't it? And you think he's like God incarnate, you know? This divine person who's completely perfect. And then all this expectation that when I get him, now I've found happiness. And then we will be together for eternity. Like I always quote Nicole Kidman, you know, the Australian actor, when she was with Tom Cruise. I read magazines. And she said, we will be together until we're 80. Because that's what attachment thinks, desperately. Now that I've got him, now I've got the cake, now I've found happiness. It's like this, we now think we've found the solution to the dissatisfaction. And of course, with people and relationships, it's way more complex than cake. But the same principle. So then one of the key jobs of these unhappy states of mind, they feel bad, but they are liars. They exaggerate. So the more hunger and neediness I have for Peter, attachment, when he doesn't do what I want every single second, then aversion will arise, upset. And the more my attachment is there, the more upset and angry I will get. You know? And then when I'm really angry with Peter, how does he look now? Disgusting. Look at the cake after the 5th piece. It looks disgusting. So these unhappy states of mind, these deluded states of mind, they've got 2 main functions. They are very disturbing. Just a having of them is very painful. And the more we investigate beyond the emotion, beyond the feeling, deeper down, how there are these conceptual stories, they're completely exaggerating. They're liars. But we don't hear the story part of it. We just feel the feeling. You know? We don't notice all the stories in our mind. And that's why the more concentration we have, the more we pay attention to what's happening in here, days, months, years of practice, we get better and better and better and better at identifying all these crazy stories, which is there all the time. And then learning to argue with them and gradually change the habits. But it's this is really subtle stuff. You know? So we've got ignorance, ego grasping, the main delusion, I, the neurotic I, and then attachment to constantly get what I want, which is essentially what it is. It's this frantic neediness to get the nice things. And that, another way to say it is frantically get what I want every second. And it can only bear the nice things. Attachment is a junkie that only wants the nice things. So when the things go bad, when he doesn't do what I want, when he, whatever, then panic arises. Aversion manifests as upset, irritated, annoyed, frustrated, really angry, or even depressed. There's all these are variations of aversion. And that's the response when attachment doesn't get what it wants. And it's 1,000 times a day. And we never pay attention until it's really extreme. We don't pay attention until the wheels are falling off. Are we communicating? We all recognize, don't we? So Buddha's expertise is this stuff. He's observed it deeply, profoundly in his own mind. That's why, if, this is 2,500 years ago. These Hindus before him identified this stuff internally. But because you read all these arcane, strange Indian literature, it just seems like weird things. It doesn't talk in the kind of way we talk, This is Buddhist psychology I'm talking here. I'm not making up anything. And on the basis of these, you then get jealous and all the other dramas, So in Buddhist, the way they present the teachings in the Tibetan Buddhist, presentation, there's different levels of practices. But here we're talking a more advanced level. So what is the first level of practice we have to do to even be capable of knowing our mind? Well, the first one is so boring. It's like we don't think it even sounds like practice. It's doing what your grandmother said. Behave nicely. Don't kill. Don't lie. Don't cheat on your boyfriend. Don't steal. Don't badmouth people. In other words, the first level of practice in Buddhism, given that we're driven by ego grasping, attachment, anger, hurt, jealousy, all these dramas, given, and it's really obvious, that what we do with our body and our speech is driven by what's in here. We don't tend to think this in our culture, but this is fundamental in Buddhist psychology, that whatever we do with our body and speech is driven by what's in here. I mean, it's sort of obvious in a way. It's really obvious, but we don't think of it like so simply because we're not paying attention to what's in here. We think much of what we do is instinctive, so we don't pay attention. So the very first level of practice, the heart practice, the actual job of really being a Buddhist, if you like, is this job of working on your mind. That's the Buddhist approach. But he says you can't do that really well if you can't even control your body and your speech. So in other words, if you've got strong attachment for food, just think simply. Then if all the time every time you see cake, you have to shove it in the mouth, then how can you work on the attachment, which is in the mind? You've got to control the servant of your attachment, which is your hand. Leave it in your lap. I mean, it seems so simple, but we know how hard it is. So it's obvious you've got to discipline your body and speech. So, if you're always angry, then always just shouting out angry words. It's not surprising. Look at the people in the traffic. Look at people in their houses. Feel anger, out it comes the mouth. Well, control the mouth. This is a powerful practice. I think in groups, in families, in relationships, in organizations, the speech is what does the problem. Look at families, how they break up and fights and things. It's because of speech. We don't even kill each other, I don't think. We don't punch. It's the speech. Because as soon as the word is said, the damage is done. We know this, It seems so simple in a way, control your speech. Oh, yeah. So obviously if you've got enough, using your own discipline, your mental discipline, to make a decision to control the speech, then forget even the benefit to other people. Even if you're in your house all day and you never meet anybody else, but you're talking to the television, you're listening to the radio, you're reading the paper, and you get angry all day. You're cursing and swearing about the politicians and all these people. By the end of the day, you've been shouting and yelling. Well, who's exhausted? You. Look at the harm you've done to yourself. But we don't think like this. We think, but I'm allowed to say what I like. In other words, we don't realise. We sort of do, but we really don't think of it's important that what I do with my speech affects me, has an impact upon me. We certainly often don't think that with our mind. We think, I'm allowed to think what I like. Well, of course you are. But, if you recognise that your thoughts, your anger, your depression, your jealousy, your angry words harm you, then of course you wouldn't want to do it. But we don't realise this. We think, I'm allowed to do it. We don't even notice the way we harm ourselves, basically. This is the first point that Buddha makes. It's for our own sake that we would want to control our body and speech and mind. First, we have to realise our own pain, our own suffering, and how we cause it with our crazy, uncontrolled body, speech and mind. It's sort of practical, but we don't think of it like this, That's why we get, it's like, I was a Catholic, okay, and I have great respect for my Catholic upbringing, no doubt. But I have this Catholic friend, a priest, a Jesuit, and we have these discussions, and I really enjoy. And I asked him, I said, what is a sin by definition? And he said, very clear, it is doing what God said not to do, going against the will of God. Now, if you have complete faith in God and you live your life like that, well done. I'm not complaining. But we can be very neurotic about that and then get guilty because I do the wrong thing. We don't want to get criticised. We get all caught up and neurotic and guilty. But for the Buddha, he's not like a creator. He says the same as Jesus. He says don't kill, just like Jesus. He says don't lie. But his reason is different. It's not because he says so. So he's not like a boss. That means he doesn't have the power to punish or reward. There's no concept like that in Buddhism. He's saying two things. He's saying that the actions that I do with my body and my speech first impact upon me. Buddhists, in fact, this is the view of karma. What he means by karma is that every single thing we think and do and say has consequences for myself, automatically. Not in the judgment sense. In the same way that we understand if you eat too much sugar, you might get diabetes. If you smoke too many cigarettes, you might get lung cancer. We don't think that's called punishment. We know it's a natural law, and that's how Buddha talks about a person. It's natural law that being angry and jealous and shouting and yelling harms the person who does it, not to mention creating the habit to keep doing it, not to mention his more long-term view about future karma, because he basically says we create ourselves. We don't need creating by somebody else. So the first reason in the Buddhist view to want to control your body, speech and mind isn't because someone said so, isn't because you're naughty, it's because this will benefit you. This takes time to hear. It's like it's for self-respect, not because you're supposed to be good, you're a bad person. We hear it like that. But everything I think and do and say brings consequences to me. Then we can see this, we can start to have compassion for others. That's why the compassion wing has to come second. This is the wisdom wing. This is working on ourselves. So it's really coming, the correct way is this should be coming from self-respect. Not to beat yourself up because you're angry. You realize it and you're exhausted by it, but it's not, and this is the crucial point that Buddha is saying. It doesn't define me. It's not at the core of my being. This is something really fundamental in Buddhist psychology. So there's kind of space there. Yes, it's an old habit. Yes, it harms me. Yes, I make a mess of my relationships, but it's not set in stone. I can change it. This is very helpful, actually. We get so depressed sometimes, we just think what to do, My mother used to say, you're your own worst enemy. It's kind of true. So also, all the more too, to have awareness, to do a bit of concentration, so I can be conscious of what comes out of my mouth. And I can make some decisions, control the mouth. I mean, I often use this example, but in my family, we're all old now, but 6, 7 siblings, we're all old. And we've been close all our lives, And when we were small children, we didn't have enough beds, so we shared beds, right? We were poor. And we're all very volatile, like me, all speak fast and bossy, My 6 sisters, and then my one brother. The brother came at the end. The whole suburb celebrated. And my brother was born. So anyway, the point is, we would fight, like children, of course, children fight. Then we grew up, we all had our life, we'd come back at Christmas and we'd fight. Not every time, but you understand, families, So as we got older, we're all fairly harmonious. It's pretty good, really. It's very amazing. 7 of us, we still all have contact with each other. I mean, you see families. It's terrible what happens in families. It's heartbreaking what happens in families, isn't it? Breaks in families, And it's mostly because of speech. That's my point. So I would say the last 10, 15 years, among my siblings, there's this unspoken agreement. 2 things. When we are together, we do not talk about things we disagree with. So therefore we have harmonious conversations. I mean, it's quite extraordinary. It's sort of like nothing it's like phenomenal. We really make an effort because we've got very different viewpoints, about lots of things. But we talk about the things we have in common. So we have wonderful times together. And then second, when we talk to each other, which is very common, we never say one bad word about each other. So the consequence of this over the years is a genuine affection for each other, and even the ability, which is not common in families because you get jealous and everything, the ability to praise each other and delight in each other's qualities. It's very, very amazing actually. But I can see that's because we've controlled our speech. Something so simple. Do you understand? That takes effort. because we want to say those words. We can't wait to tell Polly what Janet said and Judy what Mary said. She said this to me and it's not fair, because we all feel the need to tell somebody, you know. So we can have someone to talk to, but choose the person and really trust that person that you can, as you know, to talk. We need that. But our big problem is speech. We don't kill each other. We don't rape each other. It's our speech. You know? This is sort of simple, but really quite profound. And the benefit to yourself is incredible. Because if you're angry all day and then speaking about it all day, by the end of the day, you are exhausted. I mean, it's sort of obvious. So for your own sake, you know. I mean, I'm part of a Buddhist organisation. This is one of the centres of Lama Zopa, about 160 centres. And I've been around for many years, right? And somehow I'm connected to all these groups, and there's sort of like my family a bit. This organisation, I've been around for many years. And I'm a bossy kind of person. Do you know, and I'm not being sarcastic. And I like doing things, and I like getting things done, like you said. It's true. So I have very particular views about how to do things, naturally. So guaranteed, when I go around all our centres, and some of the people who run the centres, they're hopeless. They're not good at it. I can see that, you know. So then so what I've learned over the years is you learn to be a little bit humble, and you accept the person does this way, and you praise the person for doing this. Because it means all the time I'm thinking how they should run the centres better, and why don't they do this, and why don't they do that, and if only they wouldn't do this, you go crazy, you know. I mean, there's nothing wrong with trying to make things better. But again, there's always that point. If you can't, you've got to relax, you know. So for your own sake, so I can see for myself, you know, my mind is more content. Your mind's more content. You become more content. If you can change something, change it. Buddha has a saying, if you can change something, please change it. But what if you can't? That's the problem when it starts, you know. Are we communicating here? This is ordinary life, you know, nothing fancy. Any questions? Yes.
Is it true that anger is always frustrated desire?
Well, it's an interesting point, isn't it? Are you all clear? Say that. Tell everybody that question again. It's a good question.
Is it true that anger is always frustrated desire?
Are you hearing him clearly? Okay. I think. Okay. Let's say you're a really kind father. Let's say you're compassionate. You see your child's mind. You see that you've told them already, clean your room. 3 times you've told them to do it out of kindness, softly. But they just haven't done it because they're lazy, and you know their mind. Do you understand? So you now know that you have to be more firm. I told you to clean your room. I need you to do it right now. Now, that child could think Daddy's angry, right? But you know in your heart it's coming from the purest place. So you can sound like you're angry in the right situation, but it's got to be coming from the right place. Therefore, that is not anger. That is not anger. But I think most of us, it is anger. Most of us is frustration. And if it's frustration, it's anger. Definitely, if it feels like you want to explode, if it's uncomfortable, if it's unhappy, that's delusion. So, but I think part of our problem is, let's say when it comes to political activity and seeing the world and trying to make the world a better place, we mix it with compassion. You understand? So really the sign that it's a neurotic state of mind is it feels bad. It's all knotted up. If it's virtuous state of mind, if it's clear and wise, and this is advanced, there would not be tense, it would not be frustrated, it would not be all tight, it would be completely clear and controlled and genuine. It could be emotional too, but it wouldn't be that tightness, and that goes really deep, I think. So it's very hard to distinguish. It's very subtle. But can you think of a scenario that you would suggest that anger is not frustration, that is valid?
I think you can divide anger into positive anger and negative.
Okay, good. So that's my point. So tell me an example.
An example of positive anger in case of the father.
Speak a bit louder, would you, for everyone's sake?
Sorry.
Okay. What's an example of positive anger?
Well, I think the example that you just gave.
Yeah, but I would say that's not anger. That's my point. Anger, we're talking about coming from inside. It's frustrated. It's coming from attachment. So I wouldn't call that anger. I would call that it's a wise kind of action. It could look like anger, but it's coming from compassion. That's then if you want to call that anger, then that's fine. That's good then. But it's come time. One time, okay, Martin Luther King one time, he used the word anger. He said it's good to be angry. He meant it's good to find fault. Oh my God, look at the racism. Look at the suffering. Look at the trouble in the world. But then he said, then you say, what can I do to help? That, I think, is compassion. Do you see the difference?
But the difference is, what we might call negative anger is anger, perhaps that's frustrated.
Really can't hear you.
I'm sorry. What we call like negative anger is anger that arises from personal frustrated desire. And
That's right. Well, that's what Buddha's calling it.
Causes you to lose control.
That's what Buddha's calling it.
Whereas this other example you gave, the person is still in control. So it's
That's not. Then I would say it's not. To be really clear, using Buddha's terminology, I wouldn't call it anger. Then I'd call it something else because it gets too complex. That's it's quite hard in our culture because we don't think this way. We don't make such clear distinction. So it's anger is in Buddhist view is an erotic conceptual state of mind when it's built that's coming from thwarted attachment. That's right, exactly as you're saying, and that is anger. So when it can be seeing something wrong and my God, that's terrible. How can I fix it? It might look like anger, but that's coming from compassion. That's incredible, and that's strong action. And you can't tell the difference sometimes by looking, but we've got to be very, very wise with our own mind to distinguish the difference. And that means we've got to be brave sometimes. We've got to be brave sometimes to look like we're being angry and not worry if people are going to criticize us, because you know it's coming from the right place. That's got to come from some wisdom, you know. Do you understand? Yes, no, it's a really important point. Now, of course, the Buddhist view is highly advanced. It's until you realise emptiness and you realise that you really get rid of this stuff, you know. So it goes very, very deep. And we're not to be scared of it. We have to do our best. You know, as long as we are conscious of our own mind and are sincere in seeing what's in there, you know, that's important. So important. Yeah, because I think a big misconception, a wrong reading of Buddha's instructions, like I've got to give up attachment, then you think you've got to give up wanting anything. That's the other extreme with attachment. Oh, would you like some tea, Robina? Oh, no, I don't mind. Would you like some coffee? Oh, no, I don't mind. That's indifference. That's not the opposite of attachment. You know, so equally the same, misunderstanding. Anger can mean you've got to give up doing anything, give up action, giving up even having opinions. That's nihilism. So it's really much more precise than that. Do you see what I'm saying? Or not?
This is such a thing as real anger where you lose control, and it's not frustrated desire. For example, if somebody hits me on the head with a club, I may get angry, but is that a case of frustrated desire?
Of course it is, no question. Absolutely. It would be utterly instinctive response of ego grasping, because ego grasping, the deepest delusion, fear is its basis. And all the delusions are in the nature of fear. There's like panic arises, that's for sure. That's why, if you're a highly realized being, you wouldn't have that anger. Literally would not. So until then, we're going to have some semblance of it, but as we practice, it gets less and less. And initially you notice it, you get a shock, and then you work with yourself, you know. Because Buddha's really very radical in what he's saying, that we can really literally get rid of all fear, all delusion, all attachment. Absolutely. And that's a bit ordinary terms, that's quite shocking. You know? We can't imagine that. Yes.
I have a question about the attachment.
Yes.
Me being here, listening to you.
Yes.
I came here because I want to be better. I want to work.
That's right.
I want to do my homework.
Yes.
Sometimes I'm asking myself how much attached
I understand
to
that.
the image
I understand.
of me being
No,
better.
I understand that.
And so,
Yeah,
can
but
you
put
just-
it this way. Yes, of course, being the way we are now, everything we do, including the good things we do, there's going to be attachment there. it's impossible not to have it. But at least you're attached to becoming a better person than being attached to killing people. How marvellous. So it's a question of degree. So it's given that it's kind of like the water's polluted, okay? So it can be 90% polluted or 10% polluted. Eventually it can be 100% not polluted. But we've got to recognise the different levels every day. And then you learn to be skillful. The Bodhisattva path very much is, given that you've got attachment, at least be attached, because we can't help it, it's deeply ingrained. At least be attached to something useful that's beneficial. And if you're really working properly, you will get rid of it eventually. But if it's attachment to, let's say, the idea of being a Buddhist, and you go home and you do your meditation every day. Is he your friend? Does he live with you or something?
My husband.
Okay, your husband, yeah. So let's say you start to become a holy Buddhist, and he does the dishes. Oh, be quiet! I'm trying to meditate. Then I would suggest you've got a problem with attachment, but not to real practice, but to a fantasy of a practice. And that's a very common oh, I'm trying to practice. Be quiet. Well, excuse me. Shut up and do your meditation in quiet. Let him do the dishes. He's the one who's really practicing. You understand? So there's inevitably there. But, attachment is a fantasy. So as long as we know that and then you catch yourself, then you just, you put the virtue in there. It's all right. It's really good. It's okay. Do you understand?
Yes.
But if you're more being aware and trying to be sincere, you're going to catch all these silly old games inside. You tell you to shut up, and you keep catching it at ever deeper levels.
Yeah, I was feeling guilty and even ashamed.
Ridiculous.
Because
Utterly ridiculous. Delight, darling. Absolutely rejoice. How amazing. I mean, that really is true. It's rare on this planet. I'm not trying to make you sort of feel arrogant. But to actually, us sitting here today, truly wanting to become better human beings, is so rare on this planet. We should feel so happy that even the thought to do it is there. It's unbelievable. So do not feel incredible delight. But be humble as well. Do you understand? No doubt about it, darling. It's amazing. Go for it. Lucky man having you.
22 years.
Oh my God, I think it's unbelievable. I admire anybody who can hang around that long. That's incredible. That's amazing. Well done. Amazing. What else do you need? Sorry.
You said that the root.
Where are you? Who's talking?
Over here.
Okay, yes, go.
You said that the root nature of all attachment, or no,
The root delusion is called ego grasping. This panic-stricken sense of me. Oh, sorry, go on, say it again.
Yeah, you said that its nature is fear.
All the neuroses, they're in the this Buddha's very distinct, interesting view. They're in the nature of fear and panic. Absolutely, every one of them.
What is it fear of?
It's primordial fear based on this wrong sense of a self, right at the very beginning. Buddha says it all starts in this deepest, most primordial misconception of a separate I, which seems so abstract to us. And the fear, this seems very abstract. Fear comes in all of these because these states of mind are distorted. They're not reality. They're not reality. They're believing in a fantasy, and we've practiced it for eons. So their natural inclination is to grasp. And so then it's always fear of not having, and fear of letting go, and fear of things changing. Everything is to do with fear. Attachment based in fear. Jealousy is based in fear. It's all related to ego grasping, which is this primordial sense of a grasping. I mean, it seems very abstract. It's hard to imagine not having it. So, when we realized emptiness, quote unquote, have cut these misconceptions from the mind. And this is inconceivable to us in our ordinary world. As the Lama Zopa puts it, as the Buddha puts it, there is no fear. So that means, even a simple example, Lama Zopa, okay, I'll tell a story. Our teacher, Lama Zopa, here. He is a Sherpa, okay, up in the mountains. And he was said to be, when he was a little boy, he was said to be the reincarnation. This is very traditional Tibetan Buddhism. He was recognized as the reincarnation of a previous meditator. Okay, whatever. So he, which implies he was a highly realized being. He'd got realizations. He was able to go through the death process really clearly. This is very much the Tibetan Buddhist approach in the Vajrayana teachings. And he then was able to choose his rebirth. They talk like this, okay? So let's assume that's true. So there's this little boy. He was recognized as since he was tiny, since he could crawl, his mother would turn her back. There were these very poor Sherpas. And then they'd find little Zopa crawling up the mountain to where they know the cave of the previous yogi was. So from the time he could talk, he'd be walking up the mountain. Come home, he'd say, no, that is my home. So anyway, and then the sister said, they play games, and he'd always play the role of a lama. ringing bells and all this, whatever, you understand. So then the mother, in this tradition, so she thought she'd better check up with the local lamas, and they checked and they said, yes, it would seem he is the reincarnation of this previous lama. There's a system in Tibetan Buddhism, they do this. So anyway, the point is, the story is this. He was up in a monastery, he was 8 years old, and this is like, would have been in 1952 or something, and he was in a monastery, and there was a big river, and the other side of the river there were these strange looking people. They had pale hair, pale coloured eyes, pale skin, obviously white people. He hadn't met white people before, you know. So he was very fascinated, wanted to meet these people. So there's this big bridge, this rickety, this bridge is not very stable. So he gets his bowl of potatoes, because Sherpas eat their potatoes, because you can't go empty-handed. So he goes across the bridge and he falls in the water. Well, of course, they don't teach them swimming up there. So he's drowning. And this is how he told the story, okay. He said, to himself, he's 8, drowning. He said, first of all, the head, his own head, was coming to the surface for air. And then he said, the thought occurred to me, the person known as the Laudo Lama is about to die. And then he said, I didn't know anything about emptiness, meaning all these teachings that we're talking about here. I didn't know anything about emptiness, but there was no fear. Now, what I'm meaning is this literally, and this is too shocking for us. I think we assume, wasn't it Mr. Darwin or somebody who came up with the concept of instinct for survival? What's that term, you know? When it's and we see it, look at animals, look at humans, when we're attacked, fear rises, like you just said, you know, and panic and fear rises, and then we have deduced that you need that in order to make some wise decisions. So the assumption here would be that if Lama Zopa, this little boy, didn't have this, which seems he didn't, then he would have sunk to the bottom of the river like a stone, saying, oh, well, I'm drowning, that he needed the fear to make him act, you know. Do you understand? But the Buddha's view is that instinct for survival, I would say, is a really good term for what he refers to as ego grasping, this primordial neurotic sense of I that, of course, is evidence in everybody. We've all got it. But this is the whole approach in Buddhism, that he's found methods to even go beyond that, which is pretty abstract for us. So so he said, in other words, he was, even though you would have seen a little boy coming up for air and gasping, this is the point that's hard to imagine, his mind would have been clear. He would have still done what he had to do to save himself from the block of wood punched on your head, but his mind was clear. That's what Buddha's saying, essentially, which is kind of radical, because we don't talk like that. This is based on his understanding of how the mind works and how all the neuroses, starting with ego grasping, giving rise to attachment, then to anger and all the other dramas, these are deeply, instinctively ingrained in all sentient beings, including animals. But that's what he means by samsara, and that all his methods are to eliminate all this, which is, you know, a long way to go. So it's interesting, isn't it? Yeah. You're going to sleep. Are you going to sleep?
No.
Thinking.
Listen.
Okay, well. Any questions, you people? I'm trying to talk more slowly. I hope you noticed. Are there any more questions? We want a tea break? Yes, sweetheart.
I don't have a question, but I'm afraid your stool is quite far
Is it?
in the back. The
Oh,
right
it's
one, and I'm just
No,
looking at it,
no,
and I'm just.
No, it's fine.
Is it fine?
It's fine. It's very
It's just
heavy.
from my perspective.
I'll move forward. Thank you. Okay. Just go back. And I only fall back to the window anyway.
Yes.
Right. So do you want a cup of tea time or have a tea break? Come on. Tea and cake break.
No perspective.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Genesis and break it down a little bit for us.
absolutely. Yeah, that's right. Talk about fear. I mean, fear comes when fear is we're experiencing much of the time. We don't call it fear. So, you know, even if you really want something to be a certain way attached, let's say, to getting a certain outcome, and you don't get it, I mean, it's like panic comes, isn't it? Do you understand? Well, that's fear. You mightn't say it's fear, you might just call it anger. I mean, if you look at a person who's shouting and yelling, think of a child, and you see them shouting and yelling, and we'll go, oh, they're angry. But excuse me, look at them. Their eyes are wide as saucers. They're completely hysterical. They're saying the most irrational things. Is that not having a panic attack? They're having a serious panic attack, but we don't call it that. Are you hearing me? I mean, it's nakedly, obviously fear, you know. It's like, oh my God, this can't be happening because his attachment didn't get what he wanted. That's anger is in the nature of fear. We just don't think of it like that. And it's because it's not getting what it wants. It's not getting what attachment wants. So that means attachment is this frantic, desperate, needy little girl or boy in there that is frantically trying to get what it wants every second. And then another way of looking at it, and it's not criticizing us, another person who mightn't get angry, when attachment doesn't get what it wants, when some terrible thing, you see, when some terrible thing happens, don't try and hear me, this is really shocking the way, it's shocking to hear it like this. If a mother's baby dies, we just say, that's natural. But analyze it. Let's analyze the different states of mind. So first of all, the Buddhist view is a very strong karmic history with each other, a really powerful bond. Okay, so that baby comes to that mummy's womb. Then there's this unbelievably close connection between those two people. Then on top of that, you can say there's this unbelievable attachment to this baby from the mother. That is called attachment. I mean, one of the functions of attachment is that the object looks way more delicious to you than to other people. That's really clear. If you've got a baby, you see a picture of 1,000 babies, your baby shines out in there with absolute certainty. Now, I mean, this sounds like it's cruel calling it attachment. It sounds like it's criticizing people. All it's doing is giving an analysis using Buddhist psychology of what goes on in the human mind. Do you understand my point? So that is massive, unbelievable attachment. On top of that, there's incredible love and compassion to take care of that baby. Mothers sacrifice their lives for babies. That's unbelievable, you know. That's virtue. So there's all these incredibly strong states of mind. Now, so some people who won't get angry, it goes internal. It becomes like incredible depression. Or it might be something so bad happens, like a baby dies, and a woman, a mummy, literally, as we would say, she will lose her mind. She will go mad. Do you understand? That, you could say, is her way of aversion expressing itself, that it becomes literally unbearable to even confront and look at and think about this terrible event. That's the response when attachment doesn't get what it wants. So according to depending on the person and all the other qualities, but that's just unbelievable fear. So people go mad. People kill somebody else, people kill themselves, or lose their mind. And that's how deep attachment is. So then you try to think, well, what would you be like if you didn't have attachment? We can't conceive of a person. We just think it's natural for a mother to be this way. So the only thing we can think of, well, she doesn't have attachment. Does that mean she doesn't care if her baby dies? We would sort of try to think that. But it's not because of attachment. It's not the only reason she doesn't care. The unbelievable love and compassion will be there too. But the point that Buddha's making is this attachment and this anger and this fears, all this stuff that's in us that is completely normal. Everybody has it. He happens to say he's got these methods that can unpack and unravel this stuff, and that we actually have the capability of totally ridding the mind of it. That's what the meaning of the word nirvana is. It's not some place like heaven. But clearly it's advanced. Because it's so normal for us to think that you're a normal person. So we factor it in as normal. But okay, I'm saying many things. But basically all those unhappy states of mind, their nature, their energy, their voice, their character is fear personified. And a good question, why? Of what, you know? Well, it's very hard to hear because the very nature of the ego grasping, the root delusion, whose main energy is fear, that's the one that rises up when really bad things happen. You have a complete panic attack, like being attacked, your baby dies, or it's like completely like the mind goes mad. The heart beats fast, you're attacked, you're offended, even small versions of it. It's too primordial for us. It's the very fact of believing in this fantasy I in the first place, the Buddha says, that the fear is there. That's why when you completely cut it and have seen the reality, then it's not possible to have fear. But it doesn't mean you be unemotional. That's the thing. We sort of can't imagine how you'd be if you didn't have attachment, didn't have ego grasping, didn't have anger. You'd have infinite love, infinite compassion, infinite kindness, infinite wisdom, infinite clarity. You know, if someone's suffering, you'd have tears, you'd have compassion, but you wouldn't have all these other neuroses. And that's hard to hear, you know, because it's utterly normal for us. I don't know, all I can do is say these things. So therefore you could say, in day-to-day, really brave level of practice, given that this needy attachment is in us, deep in our bones, always wanting the nice things only, and that it can't bear anything but the nice things, then practice is greeting the unnice thing. So don't wait till your children leave, don't wait till your baby dies before you do this. It's too hard then. Do you understand my point? Do it when I always use a simple example, and it sounds ridiculous. But if you think of ordinary life, ordinary day in your life, I would say 1,000 times a day we have a little panic attack because attachment doesn't get what it wants. But because it's so small, we just think it's normal. So, you know, not even just someone jumping in front of you in the car, but even just someone, you know, you get annoyed easily. We get annoyed easily. We get upset, annoyed, frustrated, as we say. Mild versions of anger, if you like. But we don't pay attention because they're small. And secondly, we also don't deal with it. So what I mean by that is this. I always use a simple example. It sounds ridiculous. That you're doing the dishes and you drop a cup. Now, we're all good girls and good boys, and Mummy has brought us up to say that to think it's not good to break a cup. So we've trained our mind in all these things. You shouldn't break cups, you shouldn't go you shouldn't go fast. There's 1,000 don'ts we've all learned from God, Mummy, Daddy, you know, and so we've internalized those. And even though Mummy and Daddy are dead, we're still thinking that when I break the cup, oh, I'm a naughty girl. We've trained ourselves in this. So we get upset, we get angry. And it's automatic. And we don't question it. Do you understand what I'm saying? A tiny example, like breaking a cup. So the point is, not only do we think it's normal, the real point I'm getting at is we don't deal with it right there. Do the bit of therapy, like I'm talking about here, you're doing the dishes. So then what I'm meaning by practice would be, you notice, you get upset, you broke and then you suddenly notice you're worried what people think, you naughty girl, you broke the cup. I mean, all this is very deeply instinctive, and I'll talk about attachment in a minute at this deeper level, which is attachment to how people think of us, which is the deepest one. But it's a simple baby example. So you break the cup. We get annoyed. Then what's happening is a series of stories that just popped up in your mind. I'm naughty. I shouldn't break a cup. Well, then if you're noticing, then practice would be, relax, Robina. It's okay. You're human. You're allowed to break a cup. Break another one. I mean, are you hearing me? It's so tiny. But if we realize that what happens is in daily life, you see, the Buddhist view is very interesting. It says actually, every single thing anyone sees or hears, every second, everything goes into the mind. Everything is stored there. Do you understand? Everything is stored there. All our experiences are all stored there. But we don't notice 99% of our experiences, and we don't notice, and we don't remember them. That's why literally, since we're children, we've buried most of them. But they're all there, accessible to us. So no wonder we're neurotic. 1,000 things a day, every day, since we're tiny, have happened when we didn't get what we wanted. We got cried, we upset, but we never dealt with it. It just went in. And so naturally, it builds up through life. What I mean is the anger builds up, the fears build up, because we don't counteract them. Are you sort of hearing what I'm saying? It's like you're playing wrong piano all your life, but you never fix it by playing right piano. Well, eventually you're going to be playing the most chaotic sound. But if you caught yourself every time and you heard the ridiculous anger, oh, I shouldn't break a cup, I'm a naughty girl, it's completely irrational. It's perfectly fine, you're human. So, you know, I say, well, break another cup. It's all right. So then what you just did then was you played the right note. You counteracted the neurotic thought with a valid thought, with a reasonable thought, with a virtuous thought. So you just fixed that one little problem. So that's a problem you won't carry with you because you fixed it. Are you kind of hearing what I'm saying? It's so simple, it's embarrassing. But we wait until the straw that breaks the camel's back. Do you hear what I'm saying? So this is meaning being conscious of your mind. You hear yourself getting annoyed with your husband. You fix it right there. You fix it right there. Shut up, Robina. Give it a break. He's a nice guy. Just don't go there. You fixed it right there. And these are the baby events, the baby things, the tiny things. Because every second of the day, our mind is doing something. It's having an opinion about something. And many of those are negative, self-critical, critical of others, and we just don't notice. These all build up. It's really kind of simple. It's embarrassing. Are you with me, people? So if you do this really properly throughout the day, no matter how bad the day is, by the end of the day, you've sorted your mess. You can go to bed with a happy mind. But we don't, and so especially people who are depressed. I mean, there's a friend of mine who's been a Buddhist for so many years. She's like 60-something. Now, she's now finally dealing with profound depression because she's buried and hidden so many things. Her responses to it is what I mean. So now it's slowly coming up. Because the nature of depression is that, the kind of mind she has got, being a patient, kind person, when bad things have happened, she's put it away. Do you understand? Because it's too painful to look at. That's burying it. Well, it doesn't go away. It's there and it informs who we become. Everything we think and do and say informs who we become. So we have to be conscious of it. Because Buddha says everything we think and do and say is what produces me. I'm creating me every day. So I better be in charge of the process. Oh my goodness. So it's really practical. It's just that these thoughts go to a subtle level. And to unpack and unravel all this stuff, is not that easy. But that's the job. So then we get braver and braver in the face of things going wrong. Instead of complete panic, oh my God, this is too much, I can't cope, and you push it away, or instead of freak out, punch, kick, you greet it. That's powerful, I tell you. That counteracts attachment, counteracts fear, and makes you accept the problem. I mean, an extreme example of that, and I always tell this, working with people in prison, that was a very profound experience for me, because there are people in these situations where they literally can't change the external world. I mean, we have the luxury, we don't think it, that we can change the job, we can leave the husband, but we don't believe we can. That's our part of our terrible problem. We feel paralyzed, as if we can't ever leave the husband, as if we can't ever leave that job. We believe our own ridiculous propaganda. Of course we can, we're not in prison. But it's our own mind that prevents us. That's why we sit there in misery, not knowing we can change the thing, but not even knowing we can change our mind either. That's the way we live our lives. Terrible disaster. So these people in prison, they don't have a choice. So these people we helped over the years who really like the Buddhist tools, it's really powerful. So this is one woman I read about. I never met this woman. It's an extreme example. She was a hippie. It was 30 plus years ago, more. Hippie wife, hippie husband, hippie kids, hitching in Europe, in Florida. They get stopped by they're hitching and they get a lift with two fellows, something like this. And they get picked up by the police. And the two fellows kill the police and blame the hippies. Well, they're on death row in Florida. The husband even gets executed. I mean, think of this, please. They're innocent. They lose the children, he's executed, she's in prison for 17 years. Like a miracle she gets out. Eventually, proving to be innocent. All my point is, it's such an extreme example. Talk about panic. Talk about gone crazy. I mean, I hear of many people in prison who are wrongly accused, and it's so common in America. People lose their mind. They literally go mad. And that's what we think that's normal. And it is normal, because we don't know what to do. People go mad. The rage, the pain, the grief, the loss. You are completely innocent and you're in this nightmarish hell, I mean, you can't think of the pain. So this woman is incredible. I think she did yoga and things. I don't think she was a Buddhist. But she said at some point, I read her memoir. She said, at some point, I realized I couldn't change anything. But they couldn't take my mind from me. So I decided, I'm not a prisoner, I'm a monk. I'm not in a cell, I'm in a cave. All I know is we love to hear stories like this, but try and put yourself in that situation, even in your ordinary situation. Everybody's life, we have the pain of being accused wrongly, the pain of not being believed, the pain of what the wife said that she shouldn't have said, that he said this and she did that and mummy did that. That's our lives. The pain of this is our ordinary life, you know. We don't know how to deal with it, and we build it up, and it stays there for years until we either go mad or we kill somebody or we get depressed. Because we don't know how to deal with these thousands of thoughts coming in our mind. That for me is profound, you know. That showed to me that she had, first of all, it showed that, it seems to me, had unbelievable intelligence. It needs intelligence to literally see, without so much crazy emotion blinding you, that yes, you can actually change your mind. And what that means, and that's my point here, she changed her interpretation of this scenario. That's all you're doing to break the cup. The interpretation that rises up because we've trained all our life, I'm a bad person, I shouldn't break a cup. We don't even question that assumption. So it's an opinion about an event, isn't it? And that's what Buddha's saying about all these states of mind. They're all opinions. Some are realistic and some are total nonsense. So he said, it's like, so that she had the courage and the intelligence to actually accept that she couldn't change it. So she actually also could see she could learn to be happy. She could change the way she saw it. That's the meaning. That for me is the most outrageous example. And the bonus is she got out anyway. But basically she made herself a happy person. That to me is so profound, and that's the essence of what Buddha's saying, that we can do that. It's not moralistic, it's not good, it's not like you should, you shouldn't, it's not fair, none of that. It's recognizing that all these unhappy emotions are rooted in their opinions about things. I'm a bad person, I broke a cup. It's an opinion. Well, excuse me, it's not a valid opinion. It's an absurd opinion. It's fine to break a cup, break another one. You know, you can see it with children. Already looking around terrified as soon as they break a cup, waiting for mummy to hit them, you know. We're all like this since we're born. And this gets us to the deepest attachment of all. The deepest, most primordial attachment, beneath, more than for sex, drugs, rock and roll and everything. And this one implies it. It's attachment to being seen in a good light. And I think this starts from the time we're born. This is the main attachment, the main voice of ego grasping. But somehow we are desperate to get the good feedback. And desperate for people to like us, to praise us. And we hunger for that all our life. This is the biggest attachment of all, the most pervasive, the hardest to see. And the one we think is the most normal of all. We don't even think of it as a problem. But in a way, what it's saying, and this is what Buddha's saying, that the attachment, this hunger, this neediness, is the symptom of a really suffering person. In other words, think about it, you know. This attachment, it seems almost embarrassing to call it this, but it's attachment to being liked. So you've got to ask the question, what is it about me that isn't good enough until someone else sees it? That's what it means. There's an assumption in this attachment that I'm nothing unless someone else thinks I'm something. Even Barbara Streisand, I think, sings a song about that. It's so primordial. And of course we think it is so natural. And even I think psychologically in our culture, we assume by being social beings, we grow up and become a valid person by the feedback we get from others. So good feedback, yes, a child needs a good mother, a good father to give them good feedback and praise and give them guidelines and discipline. Of course they do. But this is a deep neurotic neediness that can't be fed. This is the meaning of loneliness. What's loneliness? I've got no one to share my thoughts with. Well, what is it again? What is it about our thoughts that are so inferior on their own that suddenly become good as soon as you hear them. And the irony is you're just as needy as me. So two needy, low self-esteem people supporting each other is a bit kind of demented, you know. Do you understand? Are we communicating here? It is very funny, isn't it? But Peter's some kind of peanut who thinks he's hopeless and craves me to listen to him, and I'm some peanut who believes I'm nothing unless he listens to me, and we're both trying to prop each other up in this very distorted relationship. No wonder we fight. You don't love me? No, I do love you. No, you don't. You understand? It's for attachment, people. And the deepest one, attachment to being seen. In other words, we have no confidence that I'm anything until someone else tells me I'm something. That's how bad it is. That's the deepest of suffering. That's our deepest suffering. They say the yogis in the mountains who've given up everything are still thinking about what the people down in the village are thinking about. That's the deeper, that's the last one to go. And this is utterly in us all the time. If we start to begin, we really begin to hear this constant conversation in our own mind, it's always in reference to others. How I'm seen, what I'll tell them if I do see them, and what I think they should think, and what I say, and it's not fair, and he said this, and I'll say this, and he that. And then we do things, we're thinking of telling someone we're doing them. We're driving home, we see some unusual thing, we start telling someone in our mind about it and can't wait to get home to tell somebody about it. It's like we can't hold anything in our own heart and our own mind. It's not valid. Nothing in here is valid until someone else hears it. It's quite intense. And look at how mad we become if we are, let's say, like wrongly accused. At the same time as reading about this woman in prison, I read about another guy on death row, and this is really common in America. I mean, it's just outrageous, so shocking, such a corrupt system. He's typical. He was innocent too, and he went completely crazy. He would shout every day as long as he had a voice. I did not rape and kill that woman. He went completely crazy. And what part of you is crazy? Not your nose or your ear, your thoughts. The pain of even one person criticizing us, look at it, it's unbearable, isn't it? The pain of, especially if they're dear beloved, of being accused of something we didn't do. Sometimes we can never let go for the rest of our life. The pain is too much, you know. It's just another person's opinion about us. We know it sounds simple, but we see how deep it is. And this is because we crave, the deepest craving, the deepest attachment is to be seen and approved of by others. We rely upon that to make us think, I must be a valid person. And this is too terrible. Buddha says we are already valid, and we have to become that valid. We are already valid, but we have to become it ourselves, you know. This is the suffering of ego grasping, in the sense of a separate, nothing, concrete me. You know. So the opposite isn't, oh well, I don't care what people think. That's extreme again. It's more nuanced than that. It's not beginning to develop ourselves a certainty about what is valid and what is not. And that is what enriches us. That development, the lessening of attachment and anger and fears in our own mind are what bring me more fulfillment. You're kind of feeding yourself. You become more content in who you are, more fulfilled, therefore more joyful in yourself. This is what Buddha talks. This is it, you know. Again, we hear these words. It's not as if we don't know it to some degree. It's just that all I would say is this is what Buddha's expertise is. But we don't hear it in this casual way. You don't read the literature sounding like this. But this is the modern way of talking about it. This is the consequence of practice. And you get more integrity. Therefore, you're brave enough to stand up for what's right in the world, even if nobody likes you. You have courage, you're fearless, you're content, and you're much more compassionate. Because once you realize your own self, once you know yourself, you know everybody else. We're variations of the same thing, But the Buddha's saying you've got to know your own suffering, your own delusions first. Then you can have compassion for others. So why don't we just do a little bit of boring old concentrating on our boring old breath. Give it a try. So, okay, I'll go through the classic position of the body, the way all the great yogis over the centuries have found is most conducive to good meditation. And we do the best we can. So the first one is the legs. That all the great meditators say that having the legs in what they call full lotus, when you're sitting cross-legged, each instep on the other thigh. That's said to be most stable. And we're talking here about serious meditators who spend years in meditation. If you're sitting in that position, you're very, very stable. You don't topple over. So most of us can't do that. So if you have one leg on the other thigh, that's auspicious. If you can't do that, have ordinary cross-legged. And like most of us here, we're not doing that. So we're sitting in a chair. So, but the thing is, His Holiness the Dalai Lama said, it's really auspicious to sit, if you like to sit cross-legged, to start your session in full lotus position. It's really auspicious to sort of create the cause to be able to do it. Because for the most advanced practices, they say we need to sit in that position because all the subtler energies are aligned very nicely. So if you can, fantastic. If not, that's no worry, and then do the best. So those who are sitting on the floor, on the chair, it's important you don't slump into the back of the chair. So hold your own body up straight. It's important you do that. And have your feet firmly planted on the ground. Very comfortable. You've got to hold your own body up, otherwise you sort of slump. It's not good. Makes the mind more sleepy. So the next thing is actually your bottom, So if you're sitting cross-legged, you have to find the cushion that works for your mind, works for your body. But if you're very flexible legs and you can sit in full lotus, then they say that just having a cushion just under your coccyx, kind of propping you up slightly, gives you a sense of slightly not falling backwards, But you have to find the way that works for you. So here we are sitting in a chair, not to worry. So the next one then is the back. The back, very upright. So what this really means is not to be tense. So the trouble is, so I like to think like this. I don't say it like this, but I like to think of it this way. Think of your skeleton hanging on a hanger. Everything's completely straight, isn't it? So now all the soft bits, all the muscles and all your soft bits are hanging on the hanger, but completely relaxed. So your spine, your whole skeleton is upright, but you flop the muscles. So often we hold a lot of tension in our shoulders and in our abdomen. We don't like to look fat, so we squeeze our abdomen. Well, so sit up straight, keep your skeleton upright, your shoulders relaxed but upright, and then flop your muscles. Just let all the muscles relax. That's the ideal way to sit. No tension in the muscles, but upright, okay? Your hands, traditionally, the traditional position or gesture or mudra is like this. Left underneath, right on top. So that's okay. Some people do other ways, some people do this way, some people do this way. Just put your hands where you like, just relax, be natural. It's really important to feel natural. So the main one is your head. Several things. So have your head slightly tilted forward, not thrust back. Makes the mind agitated. Slightly tilted forward, okay? First. Next, your jaw relaxed. Your jaw relaxed. And your tip and your mouth slightly open. Okay? And then, oddly enough, the tip of your tongue behind the top teeth, just near the palate. And all this is practical. This has come from the yogi's experience from years and years. And this one, the tongue there, this actually, for the people who meditate a long time, it prevents you from dribbling. So it's very practical. Apparently it prevents you from dribbling or from having to swallow your spit all the time. Having the tongue behind the top teeth, just near the palate. Jaw, lips apart, jaw relaxed, head slightly tilted forward. And then finally your eyes. So again, for the serious meditators who meditate throughout the day as well, then it's really important to have, they say it's good to have the eyes open. Remembering, of course, they've got very deep concentration, so they don't get distracted by the sensory objects. But for most of us, we do. So then maybe it's good to have your eyes closed, lightly closed. But have your eyeballs looking beneath your eyelids, looking down, as if you're looking along your nose at the ground. That's the typical position to sit in. So kind of settle into that and then forget about it, okay? Because your body doesn't meditate, your mind does. Okay. So what we're going to do is a few minutes of this concentration, but I have to talk about it first. So it's like learning a technique. You got to know what you're doing. You can't just launch into it. You've got to know what you're doing. So just sit there, relax, and listen. So okay. So what we're going to do? Okay. What we're going to do? The job we're going to do. The simple technique we're going to do, as I said, is practice paying attention to one thing. But before we do that, I want to explain a little bit the mind. This helps. So we tend to think, I'm watching my breath. Well, you are. But let's be more precise. Which part of us is going to watch the breath? Well, not your foot, not your nose, not your eyeballs, clearly not your body. Your mind will be looking at the breath, paying attention to the breath. Well, now your mind is made of many bits, and that means all the different thoughts. So this type of meditation is using not the delusions, it's not using the virtues. We're not trying to cultivate compassion, we're not trying to cultivate kindness, we're not trying to get rid of attachment. It's not about the delusions or the virtues. This is where we're using these third category of states of mind, the mechanics of the mind, if you like. We're trying to really utilize and train them. And there's many parts. So one part, first of all, is called recognition. It's a part of the mind that's working every second. So here it's going to come into play. First of all is intention. So the intention says, I will watch my breath. Then the next one to kick in will be the one called discrimination, which is working every second, which is always distinguishing between this and that. So this next bit, discrimination, does its job of locating the sensation at the tip of your nostrils, clearly. Then you've got the next part, which is, you're going to now pay attention. There's this other part of your mind called attention. That's the bit that does the looking. You're going to pay attention to that sensation. So now what's going to happen is, because we're all always used to running around following our thoughts, there's another part of our mind, Dalai Lama calls it like the policeman, and it's called vigilance or alertness. So all these are part of our mind. We don't notice them. We just feel like a big fat me thinking things, you know. So as we progress in all this, we get more precise in identifying these different parts and training these different parts of our mind. Like if you go to the gym, you get better at recognizing the different muscles, and you know which exercise to train this muscle or that muscle. But here we're talking about the mind, about thoughts. So this one is called, and then another one, the crucial one, this is where the word mindfulness comes in. It's got given lots of meaning, but technically the word mindfulness is simply referring to our capacity to remember what we're doing from moment to moment. So we know we have this every day. You decide, oh, I'll make a cup of tea. And you go to the kitchen, you get to the kitchen, you go, oh, what was I doing in the kitchen? You've forgotten. You didn't have mindfulness. Mindfulness is the ability to keep remembering moment by moment without forgetting what you're doing. That's why they call it mindfulness. It's not holy, it's not virtuous, it's one of the many parts of our mind that we're using to develop concentration. So then all these bits doing their job, okay? Intention is always there. Intend to watch the breath. We're going to pay attention to the breath. Discrimination locates it. Just, alertness watches. And every time mindfulness is trying to not forget. They're all working hand in hand. And the moment mindfulness wanders off, alertness, like the policeman, brings it back to the breath. It brings the attention back to the breath. So that's a way of breaking down all the bits and pieces. But basically, a simple way to say it is, I'm going to watch my breath, and every time I forget, I'll remember and I'll bring it back. That's it. That's the meditation. That's it. It's a practical skill, okay? The aim is not to make thoughts go away. The aim is not to feel good. The aim is, is not to have good feelings. It's a technical skill that we're trying to cultivate. So using all these parts of our mind with determination, okay? We're going to watch the breath. That's it. That's it. Just pay attention to that sensation of the air as you breathe in and out. That's the job. That sensation at the tip of your nose is a bit different when it comes in and when it comes out. But that's where you're going to focus, okay? That's your object of attention. Pay attention to that. Breathe very naturally. Bring your mind back to the breath. That's it. your mind alert and sharp, not spaced out. So relax now. It's about 3 minutes, but it's really good to do quality 3 minutes than space out for 10, you know. It's important. So again, remember this one too. It's not a relaxation technique. I forgot to say that. There are many wonderful relaxation techniques. Yoga has so many. And we need relaxing. We're crazy. But this is not a relaxation technique, I promise you. And that's why if you think it's to make the thoughts go away, feel good and relax, you're not doing what Buddha's calling single point of concentration. It's simply, to do it then, you can see, it demands rigor, it demands discipline. You've got to space out. That's not called concentrating. You just become an idiot. It feels pleasant, but it's not concentration. It's not meditation, I promise. It's really important. So there are other techniques. Buddha does not own the word meditate. But you've got to decide what it is you plan to do and to do it properly, authentically. Because it seems easy to just close your eyes and go, I'm meditating. It's very precise, you know. You know what you're talking about. Any questions from that? Any questions about anything?
I have one.
Where? Yes, sweetheart.
You've mentioned the word pain several times, or a phrase like, we don't want to go through the pain.
Yes.
And pain is difficult.
That's right.
And I've thought a lot about this pain, or not just thought about it, but the experience of it physiologically.
Yes.
Connected to the psychic experience.
That's right. The body involved, yes.
How do you, I find the right question.
Yeah.
What is the nature of that?
Okay, I'll tell you. Okay, it's very interesting. First of all, I'll just tell you in the Buddhist teachings, in the most advanced level of the teachings, they call it Buddhist Tantra or Buddhist Vajrayana, which is the same, which is a very detailed. This is coming from the Hindus, okay, and it's this whole way they explain in yoga about the subtler physical energies, the kundalini. You know, have you ever heard of that one? You know about that. So then it's this really detailed explanation of the physical makeup and the relationship of the physical and the mental. And this is the Tibetan medical system. Mm-hmm. They study for 15 years, you know. So your Tibetan doctor can feel your pulses, all the different wind energies flowing in this subtle nervous system throughout your body. And the point about it is, this is the view, that all sentient beings, all minds, are inextricably linked to our own set of these 4 elements. The 4 elements is the way we used to talk in the medieval days about the physical world. Well, that's what the Buddhist one still is. The physical universe is made of the 4 elements. The body's made of the 4 elements. And there are these detailed descriptions at the gross, then the subtle level. So then she feels your pulses, and she knows intimately these different wind energies coursing through the entirety of our body, through the subtle nervous system. And all of those different winds are connected to different states of mind. Mm-hmm. So then she can tell there's an imbalance of this wind because of your attachment, which causes anxiety. There's an imbalance of that wind, which is connected to your liver, which is connected to anger. So all of our states of mind are linked to the wind energies. So it's literally so then if you've got the pain, let's say the husband leaves you, that one, the beloved leaves you.
Or mourning, or
or someone dies, whatever those are, it's a mixture of if you had to do a list of all the components, physically and mentally, it'd be quite precise and quite accurate in the Buddhist view, you know. But the point about it is this. The Buddhist view is saying this. The more attachment we have, the more attachment, the more neediness, the more expectation, the more reliance upon that person, let's say, the more total possession of the person, which is the deepest pain of attachment. So as long as they're there in front of you, it's joy and bliss, isn't it? But when the object goes, if they die on you or if they leave you, you can't even describe the pain, isn't it? So we have to, that's the job, we have to learn to, because the pain, this is the point, is coming because of the mind. All those different states of mind called grief, attachment, anger, all this mixed together, coursing through those channels, impacting upon you literally, physically. Equally, if you have a very blissful mind, the feelings are blissful feelings. It's exactly the same. So when we've got rid of all the delusions, Buddha says, you can only have blissful feelings. There's no longer any delusions, therefore there's no grief, there's no loss, there's no pain. You're full of compassion. The Dalai Lama, who's said to be highly realised, he sits there and he's talking, and his tears come, and he talks about his mum who died. But he's not feeling the grief and the pain and the loss that we have from attachment and aversion or anger. He's just got compassion, you know. But it's not a painful feeling. Mm-hmm. So it's so intimately related to all of the states of mind. But we don't think it's that. We can't even begin to identify all those states of mind. That's the source of why the physical pain. Because the mind and the body are intimately, inextricably linked.
And when you say, or when one says, what was it that too painful to look at?
Yes,
you know?
That's because attachment is so primordial. It's this huge, like I'm saying, kind of an emotional hunger in us, plus the connection to that baby, plus the love and the compassion, all of this mixed together, and this person's got a very sensitive mind, let's say, and doesn't get raging angry, and is really quite a sensitive person, then that's the kind of person, when this terrible loss comes, it's literally unbearable. People, they can't even say the words. You can't even go, your mind can't even go to it. Even think of a small example. Something doesn't go right in your plans. You don't even want to think about that horrible thing. Our mind doesn't even want to think about it. That's aversion. So if it's really powerful, it becomes anger, or it goes in and becomes depression, or if it's the baby or the whatever, the attachment has been so shattered that the aversion is so painful, the person literally can't even think about it, can't even go there. That's why people bury all their emotions.
So aversion, pain.
Aversion, okay, the fundamental two delusions on the basis of this ego grasping. The root one is this wrong sense of self in the first place, which is so abstract for our minds. We don't even think like this. That's the root. On the basis of that, its main voice is this attachment, this bottomless pit of neediness, hunger, dissatisfaction, and it's there every millisecond, constantly making all the choices of what we do, say, and think throughout life, because what it wants is a pleasant feeling. What it wants is the nice things. That's its job throughout our life, is to get the nice things. So the stronger that attachment is, the more needy it is, the more the response when it doesn't get it is aversion. So that aversion can be violent anger. It can be irritate, annoy, frustrated, upset. It can be mild, or it can be incredible despair and depression. There's an entire spectrum of the way this aversion manifests. And it's the response when attachment doesn't get what it wants or gets what it doesn't want. Do you understand what I'm saying? And it works at really subtle level. Mm-hmm. So that's why I'm saying, even if we practice with the smallest things going wrong, greet it. Because right there you put an atomic bomb on attachment. Mm-hmm. That's even the cup example. Break the cup, attachment's not happy. You get angry. Right there, argue with it. You've just fixed it. You just healed it. Right, that little baby one. So practice with the baby ones, and then we're healing ourselves to the point where, sure, when your mummy dies, when your beloved dies, there'll be sadness, because there's a karmic connection, such a strong connection with those people. You know, but it won't have the same kind of pain that if you understand. It won't be the same. It's not as if your heart's been ripped out somehow.
I'm just thinking of also maybe the wisdom of letting it happen in a way.
Well, that's what I'm saying in a sense. That's confronting it.
Okay.
It's not resisting it. Aversion is, oh, go away. Attachment is, oh, that's nice. Aversion is, oh, no. So that can be so huge sometimes. So we've got to greet it. Practice the baby things. Don't wait till the terrible thing happens. Yes, it means let it happen. Greet it. That's profound. It's so profound. That's like that woman in prison. So incredible. She found a way to actually see it as good, not just put up with it, like passive aggression. Actually see it as good, and work with it. That's astonishing, isn't it? Yeah.
So do you mean attachment is more subtle than aversion? Somehow?
Way more primordial. It's the source of aversion. You wouldn't have aversion if you didn't have attachment. Aversion is the response when attachment doesn't get what it wants. And attachment is the closest to the deepest sense of ego. It's this deep dissatisfaction which brings neediness and expectation and possessiveness and all of that. Aversion is a response when it doesn't get what it wants.
So it would be, is it skillful maybe to try to deal with the...
Say it again.
Is it more skillful to try to deal with attachment than...
You go, that's straight, yeah, that's the best. The best of all is go straight to the ego grasping and realise emptiness, and you cut the root. If you're most advanced, that's you go straight to the root, you understand? But we've got to know where we're at. Of course, if you can get right to the... But I can see with my own life, it's very interesting. Anger's been a very strong habit of mine. Meaning the second I didn't get what I wanted, it was out. I knew I didn't. I mean, it was like... And there's a good... Okay, never mind that part. But I want to say that in a minute too. There's a good side to these things. We have to learn to see the good side. So what I'm meaning is, in all my life, I could see that was really a powerful part of my mind. And then even when I became a Buddhist, it was even more strong, because the kindness of my own teacher, Lama Yeshe, his job was to help my mind. I gave him that permission when I asked him to be my teacher. Then his job was to help me see my delusions. When he put my very first job that I had, for example, was having me work with a person, even just hearing their name from 10,000 miles away, I wanted to kill them. Do you understand my point? So how kind Lama Yeshe was. But I wouldn't, so it was like I was out of my brain. I was really raging. I hadn't had such rage in years, but I knew it was my practice. Whereas before, I would have just left, gone. So how kind Lama was to put me in this situation, so I was forced to see my own mind. So only after the years and years of practice, really saying I've subdued anger to some degree, then I began to be able to see how it's informed by attachment. It's when I don't get what I want, basically. It's a little girl inside. Attachment's a junkie that wants what I want. It's not just, it doesn't always work so self-centeredly. It can just, okay, even more subtly. No, never mind. But that's so then you've got to know where you're at. Some people can see it immediately. I mean, I used to hear some people say, I got angry once and I thought, I'll never be angry again. I thought these people must be saints, I could not believe you can say it so easily. Because we're all different. But really to see the evolution and the relationship between these states of mind in Buddhist psychology is a major part of understanding. Because they're quite intricate and they've got their own relationships, not just a big bunch of feelings, Do you understand? But the other thing is, especially in the Vajrayana, once we understand ourselves more deeply, we can really learn, they talk about in the Vajrayana that you can utilize all these qualities. You can utilize our mind. There's nothing you can't utilize. So you can utilize attachment, you can utilize anger. And that needs a lot of clarity. But you can also see, like I see, for sure I can see in my own mind, I see people who are called angry people. There's a component of anger is finding fault, isn't it? There's a clear one is finding fault. So that's a good quality. That's why Martin Luther King said it's good to be angry. He meant it's good to see, oh my God, there's racism, there's this, there's that. And that's a criticism, but it's valid because there is racism. That's not wrong. So anger, I can see in my own mind that the quality of that is mixed with the harmful part of anger is finding fault. But that can be marvelous because it's saying the next step you say is, how can I make it better? It's a kind of clarity. There's a wisdom there in it. It's a sharpness. But when it's destructive, it's a nightmare. Now look at patient people. Patient people for me are like saints. Extraordinary. A patient person means that when the thing that their attachment doesn't want happens, they don't have a mental breakdown. They kind of go, oh, that's okay, I can do this instead. Do you understand? That's incredible. But the negative side of patience, what comes with patience is the passivity to put up with something when you shouldn't. So anger is neurotic if it's always harming, but the criticism should not be thrown out. So that's why we have a very cliched view of giving up attachment. Oh, I've got to sort of give up everything. Or giving up anger means giving up criticism. No. It's giving up the neurotic aspect of those delusions, and that only comes when you know your mind well. So patient people have to learn to be more proactive. You understand? And angry people have to learn to be more humble and patient. So it's really kind of more fine than it sounds initially. It's more subtle, And that's why in Vajrayana, they talk about all the different Buddhas are different manifestations of these different qualities. So some Buddhas are a manifestation of purified anger energy. Some Buddhas are a manifestation of desire energy. So it's like a more sophisticated understanding of the mind. It's marvellous, really, because everything in here can be used. And there's another way of putting it is there's a good side to, like you were saying, this gentleman with the glasses, there's a good anger and bad anger. There's another way of saying it. You understand? So the good anger is the one that's informed by compassion. That looks like anger, but is totally for the sake of others, and the Bodhisattva's practice, for example. And then, so the Vajrayana deals with all of these, and you can learn to utilise all this, but of course you've got to, basic level first, control your body and speech, then control your mind, then you can get to this one, along with compassion. Are we communicating here, people? Yeah.
I have a question.
Yes.
This is not the question what I'm saying now.
Okay.
This is my first attendant to a Buddhist teaching.
Oh my goodness, so that's interesting, is it? Shocking, interesting, what? Food for thought?
It's wonderful.
Okay, good.
It's wonderful.
Cool.
But no, I just would like to hear from you, because a lot of my friends over the decades have been dealing with different teachings,
Yeah.
and some of them got a little bit involved in New Age and all that kind of things.
Yes.
And there was for a while this really bad habit about when you wanted to really, get something across, then you were kind of just being shut up by, oh, this is just your ego.
Oh, I see. Yeah, right, exactly. I understand.
And
We can get very fundamentalist and very puritanical,
yes,
I think.
Yeah.
That's the biggest problem.
Yeah.
I know, it's the biggest problem.
No, I'm just very happy to be here. That's all.
Good, happy, glad.
I haven't seen anything from you.
No, I think that's the one that really is the biggest danger when we start to become so-called spiritual. I mean, there's nothing more revolting, of suddenly you become all mindful and holy, and then we run around giving lectures to people. I mean, excuse me, tell them to mind their own damn business, I mean, it's the rudest thing to do, is run around telling everybody else about it. Excuse me, I mean, it's unbelievably rude, and it's such a common thing with spiritual, so-called spiritual. I know when I first heard about Buddhism, and I can see this tendency in us to get all kind of, to look like a holy person and act like holy and be mindful and walk slowly and all this stuff. I always wanted to go to the other extreme, to be normal, to hear it. And it's really easy to do that, especially when you read Buddhist literature, because it's so ancient and it's couched in such particular terms that I'm trying to make a big effort to make it sound normal, to bring it down to earth and modern. It's so important to do that. And this is really important, otherwise we mystify it and then get all holy and become like a holy policeman. I mean, people telling people to mind their own business. How dare they, Look at their own damn ego. But this is what people get so kind of, it's just very rude. We could do the job ourselves, Yeah, and we get all very cliched about it and go on about it. It's not appropriate. So what else, people? I think it's enough. Come on, it's 4:45. We've had a good day. Masses of things we've talked about. Nice lunch. It was a delicious lunch, wasn't it? Who
Can I
cooked the
just
lunch?
ask a quick question?
Yeah, darling, absolutely. Go on.
Sort of randomly thinking, what about when you're around angry people?
Well, that's the thing, sweetie
How do
pie.
you deal with that?
That's
I just go away into my room or I go out.
No, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about, that means, using you as an example, not being personal, that means, your aversion, your attachment isn't getting what it wants. Because other people are being rude, and people are rude and angry. So because your attachment, you see, listen to this for a second. Attachment, speaking very simply in a way, attachment is this desperate need in us. All it wants is good feelings. Think really bottom line. The fundamental thing we need, what we call happiness in the end, is a series of good feelings, isn't it? If you say you had a happy day, it's because things went well and you had some good feelings. And then unhappiness is unhappy feelings. So attachment's job is to get the object that'll trigger happy feelings. Well, you find the object called angry person, which instantly in you doesn't give your attachment what it wants. It arises your aversion. So another angry person might go and fight with them. You go away from it. Now, that's reasonable if you can't handle it. But the point is, we've got to not blame the object. That's all. Because it's your aversion. It's your aversion can't cope with their anger. So you could argue if you did not have anger, they wouldn't worry you. That's a really good sign. It's logical. And that's normal. We're all human. At least you walk away, darling. You don't involve yourself in the fight, which is a common thing some people do. But you've got to notice that your attachment isn't getting what it wants. It's as simple as that.
All my attachment wants is a bit of peace and
Precisely,
quiet.
it wants nice. No, it wants nice feelings.
It's asking a lot.
Yes, it is. It wants. No, it isn't. But you have to get them for yourself.
Yeah, I understand.
That's it.
Yes.
I mean, that's all. That is intense. And that's why you see, if we're not capable, we shouldn't be being policemen with ourselves. If you're not capable of doing it, we're not capable, that means we have to walk away. We have to walk away. Better than that, right? You'll kill the people. So, but don't walk away blaming them. Say to yourself, okay, my attachment's not getting what it wants, and I can't handle the aversion that's arising, so I'll walk away. Don't blame them. Say that you can't handle it. Then it's practice, darling.
Yeah, good.
Then it's humble. And we've got to be reasonable. It's like we've got to know where we're at. And if I can't handle that relationship with Peter, because he's so rude and horrible, let's say, you understand? And if this is really a sign of real intelligence, if we did this, would there be I always joke, but I mean it seriously. There's a general number on the planet that an accepted state, whatever the word is, that 40% of all women on earth who get murdered, they're murdered by the bloke in the same bed. They're murdered by the partner. Now, I'm not being rude about men here. All that's showing is we have zero understanding of what's going on in our mind. I'm a neurotic, he's neurotic. We both cling to each other thinking the other one's going to give us happiness. He's got jealousy, I've got anger. He's got attachment, I've got attachment. And then suddenly we're like these two bulls fighting before one of them kills the other. Because we're not aware of our mind. If I had any common sense, let's say he's mean to me, and that's our trouble. We don't. When we're overwhelmed by attachment, I keep thinking, oh, he'll still love me, oh, he really does love me, oh, perhaps he will love me, or he should love me, and go back like a moth to a flame. This is our problem because we've got attachment. Whereas if I've got intelligence, I'd realise I can't handle this. He's not going to change. Goodbye, Peter, I'm out of here. That's intelligence, darling, but we often don't do that, and that's what I'm saying. Our lives mightn't be that terrible. Maybe we've got a lousy job and we're not happy in our job. We've got a lousy partner but we're not happy. But we sit there, one, not knowing that we could actually walk out. Two, not even knowing we can change our mind. That's the normal life of most people. It's like hell. Do you understand?
Very
it's
good.
not. It's horrible. So we've got to have the courage to know that we can leave the job, we can leave the husband, we can do this. But we really believe, it's like we might as well be in prison. It's like we really don't believe we can. Oh no, the world won't approve of us, or I shouldn't do that, or no, I might make him unhappy, or he might be upset if I leave him. But it's just really all our own attachment. It's so fearful, we can't make any decisions. So we have to be conscious of our mind. This is Buddha's deal. It's like hardly rocket science. It's a revelation. Slowly, slowly.
I have a question.
Yeah, go. Yes,
Okay.
both of you, go.
About passion.
What's happening?
Passion.
Yes.
Passion.
Yes.
It's
called enthusiasm.
Exactly.
Wonderful.
Well, I know I'm a strong person and I'm doing things, I'm throwing myself into them. Passion.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Sometimes I get this feedback that it's too much.
For other people. I'm giving you lectures as usual.
Sorry.
So rude. I believe you, darling. I know.
Yeah.
So are these people, are these Buddhists who tell you should be more patient
No,
and mindful?
never.
Just people.
I work in, I'm a professional coach and I work in corporations with people with other coaches.
And who
they say
complains?
you have this intensity.
That's right.
You have this.
People love to criticize intense people. I know.
Okay, so we talked earlier about the attachment, and one of the things I realized just here with you is that attachment as such is not a bad thing. It's being attached through this for the bad things. Anyway, About passion.
Yes.
So
darling, listen. I understand. Listen. I know it's really just a different way of putting it. So listen, okay. The Buddha's view is we've got these neuroses, and then we have the virtues. So now, if you think of a person who's mainly got attachment and anger and neurosis and steals and kills and gets depressed, becomes an alcoholic, I'm not being critical, but meaning that person can't access too much of their virtue. They don't know how to. That's a really powerful way to put it. They mostly follow the attachment and follow the anger and follow the depression. That's the real suffering. So then you've got some people who've also got that. Me, for example, I was a maniac as a kid, but I can access my virtue. I can access my virtue. So that's our saving grace. That's what gets us to come here. Now, so then we have to recognise that love and compassion aren't meant to be gooey. So we've all got style, we've got a personality. So clearly if you say you're intense and all these words, I understand that exactly. We've got a certain personality because attachment doesn't come in one shape. Anger doesn't come in one shape. So but all together, all different qualities. So our own job is to recognise the depth of our neediness and attachment to get what I want. So if that prevails in your job, then your enthusiasm will be really heavy. And it'll be manipulative. And it'll harm others to get what you want. But maybe your enthusiasm, you've got to then see if you really want to help other people, because you're doing a job to help people's minds, and you've got some, and you see the results and you get some joy from it. That could be called your enthusiasm. So we've got to see, it's always mixed with attachment until we're hardly realised. But we've got to see which one is predominating and then really adjust the recipe all the time. So that means practice accepting when things don't go the way you want, but at the same time so that's why people think of Buddhists, you've got to give up being enthusiastic and give up being excited and you become like this boring moron. It's a complete misconception. It's wrong. It's just a misconception. You've got to walk slowly and be mindful. This rubbish.
Speak slowly.
I know. It's just not recognising everyone's got different style. So you've got to become a better version of you, which means less needy, less angry, less neurotic, more enthusiastic, more kind, more intelligent, more skillful. A better version. We're all different shapes and sizes, you know. Some people are quiet. They've got to become a better version of that. That's the way of putting it. And certainly in the Vajrayana, in the Buddhist, this view of all the different Buddhas, there's all they have these different kind of describing different Buddhas that are manifestations of, some are very peaceful, some are very wrathful. They're just really like psychology to help us identify the kind of person we are and become a better version of that. Just become a better version of yourself is the way to put it. But you've got to learn to know each part very well. And if people find it too much, I understand that. That's fine. You have to adjust to who you're around, isn't it? So, okay, be humble. Yeah, you're right, I know. Just accept, you know. It's inevitable. I mean, they're going to tell us it's our ego or whatever it is. They're always going to say something, you know. That's their business. But if we get brave enough ourselves, sometimes just say, you're right, you know. I mean, some people, I get so excited with me and I'm very direct and I debate with people. This is part of the whatever. But I mean, I can remember one time in, where was it, somewhere, at a centre, one guy left early and he wrote and said that I was so aggressive that people should be protected from me. He said that. And he said also that I insulted Vipassana meditation because I quoted Lama Zopa saying, even thieves need mindfulness. So because he interpreted mindfulness as sort of a holy kind of meditation, but I wasn't speaking about it like that. So he found I was really insulting and people should be protected from me. So you can't win everybody. But I've got to be, when I hear that, I have to think about that and realise I understand that's a possibility. But if that's where attachment to how people see us comes in, if I'm so worried about upsetting people, I'll end up becoming paralysed. So you've got to be who you are. You've got to have some authenticity. You've got to mean really well. And then if someone does criticise, be brave. So I have to apologise. I apologise sincerely. Of course I did. Doesn't mean it'll help, that they will still not like me. You can't win, you know. So that's where attachment to reputation, don't be too fearful, but be conscious. And be humble, but don't be so neurotic that you end up just doing nothing because you're scared of what people think. Do you understand? And you know everyone's not going to like us. We can't help that. That's natural. But learn from it. Say, you're right, I'm really sorry. Yeah, you're right. Just tell them. Do you understand?
Yes.
And that's why we have to have wisdom in depending on who we're with. Often I see, like, people are genuinely patient. Patient people think I'm very funny. They laugh at me. It's often angry people who can't cope with me. And that makes sense. Because we each are like red rag to the bull, you know. We see each other's, we kind of respond to the thing that we've got. It's pretty natural. Do you understand? So be brave, honey. Keep trying to help. Don't give up your enthusiasm. Yes.
Well, doesn't seem that I can anyway, so.
No. Yeah? Go.
It's a basic teaching of Buddhism that we should never accept anything without verifying.
Never what?
We should never accept anything. We don't verify it ourselves. So
Well, I mean, that takes time,
experience-
doesn't it?
Hmm?
How can you verify everything at once? You have to
No, not at once, but I think it's a basic teaching. We shouldn't believe something if it's in some old scripture or because somebody
No.
said it.
Buddha's saying, Buddha is like Einstein.
Yeah.
He says, I've proved this to be true, and you can too. So what he's saying is, don't blindly believe it as if that's enough. That's what he's saying.
Okay, I accept that.
Yeah.
But in Mahayana Buddhism,
Yeah.
there are some teachings that I think are not verifiable.
That's not. It's utterly an impossibility. That is an impossibility. I don't know what you mean by that, but that's an impossibility.
Well,
That means it's not Buddha's teaching. If you can't verify it, you can't verify it now. I mean, if you hear Einstein tell you about relativity for the first time, and you don't even know how to add up 1 + 1, you can't verify what he says, can you?
True.
But you go through the process step by step, don't you? Taking it as your hypothesis, and eventually it'll lead you to realizing relativity, won't it?
Okay.
That's the approach.
But there are some teachings that...
What's the teaching? Give an example, please.
Well, the teaching of the Bodhisattva, the concept of Bodhisattva.
You mean it can't be proved? What do you mean by not proved?
Well,
what do you mean?
Only Mahayana Buddhists accept that.
No, it's not
Theravada
true.
Buddhists don't accept
Hinayana,
that.
of course they do. They accept the Bodhisattva path.
Not Theravada.
They do. They accept the existence of Bodhisattva path. Of course they do. They just don't say. They just say most people can't achieve it. No, I suggest that you're incorrect there.
Well, I've spoken to Theravada Buddhists.
Well, they do
They
accept
get
that
the
it
sense of
exists.
it. Yeah.
Well, it depends on the Theravadan person you're talking to. But there's nothing in Buddhism that can't be proved if it's Buddhism. That I would say with absolute certainty. If it is a Buddhist teaching,
Okay.
it's got to come from Buddha in one degree or another, which means it's coming from experience. So therefore it has to be also done by you. Everybody can do it. There are differences in Buddhism about that, whether that's true. I agree with you. But that's very much the view here. Absolutely. There can't be anything you can't prove eventually.
Well, I don't think it's ever been proven. I think
Excuse
it's
me,
just
I beg, excuse me.
Yeah.
Please stop before I get too excited here. What hasn't ever been proven? Which piece precisely that Buddha says has not been ever proven?
That it's...
Now which? You have to give me a piece. You have to give me a teaching or a philosophy or a statement that has never been proven. Which one?
Okay, I'll give you maybe a better example. There's the teaching that you have to be born within...
I can't hear you, darling.
So there is the teaching that you have to be born within 49 days of dying.
That's coming from the experience of a yogi. Listen, I think, okay, we've got to get right back to basics here. Okay, let's go back to basics. Okay, now I hear you. It's a very good discussion, thank you. All right. Like we know, Buddha does not assert a creator. You accept that? You've heard that?
I think I've heard it.
Well, I'm telling you, that's Buddha's view. Fundamental. He does not accept. He says it's a misconception. Absolutely clear. So Buddhism is coming in different levels. There's Theravada, there's Mahayana, and there's Vajrayana. And all, by definition, if they're valid, are by definition coming from the direct experience of people who've experienced it. By definition. By definition. Because if it's not that, that's mean it's made up, isn't it? If it hasn't been experienced, it's been made up. Or it's speculation. What other choice is there? What other choice is there?
Well, maybe it's been experienced by other people.
Well, what else is there about it being experienced by other people? Einstein experienced relativity. Just because he proved it doesn't mean you've proved it. It's not science for you until you've proven it. That's the point. But you say, oh, but people in the world says, oh, it's all science, it's been proven. Excuse me, by whom? I've never proven relativity, so for me it is a hypothesis until I've proven it. The same with enlightenment, with emptiness, with bodhicitta, with manifestation in many bodies, with every single Buddha's teaching. It is coming from the experience of those who have experienced it. By definition, that is the Buddha's view. And you don't have to believe a single word, but you've got to, how can you enter into it like relativity unless you take it as a hypothesis that it's possible it's relativity? And then you start going with grade 1, grade 2, and each step of the way you tick the boxes and you've experienced it for yourself. And then you keep moving until eventually you prove relativity, or emptiness, or whatever the teaching is. That's the approach. Can you hear the approach I'm talking?
Yes, I agree with that. But
That's the approach, though. That is the only approach in Buddhism. If you agree with it, that's the Buddhist approach.
Okay.
That's it.
But the teaching of being born within 49 days is something.
What is this teaching you're talking about? Say it again.
What they say in Mahayana Buddhism.
The Vajrayana view, not Mahayana, the Vajrayana view
I'm not
from,
sure,
well, I'm telling you, the Vajrayana says that usually within 49 days, human days of dying, you'll be reborn. That's what the Buddhist view would say. Yes.
Okay, that's what they say.
Exactly. That's the experience of the yogis who've seen that to happen.
But other Buddhists don't accept it.
That's exactly right. So you've got to find out who's right, don't you? That doesn't mean... No, that's my point. You've just proven the point. Just because it says it doesn't mean it's right. And just because someone says it doesn't mean it's wrong. Who's going to find out? You. It's up to you. So that's up to you. There you go, right there. So, for the moment, my job as a Tibetan Buddhist is I'm a Vajrayana Buddhist. This is my working hypothesis. This is the view of the universe I am buying into and using as my working hypothesis. So I teach it and tell it with intellectual. I'm not telling you I've experienced the truth of it yet, but it's my hypothesis. What else can I do but that? And as I keep practicing each step of the way, I will prove it or not, as the case may be. What else can you do with any body of knowledge?
Yeah. So you, okay, so you're saying we should accept it as a hypothesis.
What else would you do? How can you learn to discover relativity? How are you going to spend years and years of your money in a university without having confidence that Einstein could be right? You're not saying he is right. You're not swallowing it whole, but you're taking it as your hypothesis, and that causes you, having checked up on Einstein, to enter into the course. And each step of the way, you're ticking the boxes as you go.
I agree with that.
That's the approach.
But most people in the world accept Einstein's...
Because but they haven't proven a damn thing. They're just believing in it. But that's idiocy. That's laziness. But that's okay. If you know enough people have proven it, then you can say, be more accurate, I haven't proven relativity, but it seems to be quite a few decent brain people have. That's the same as Buddha's teachings. But if you want to realize relativity, it's not enough to believe it. That's the difference. That's the difference. So Buddha says we can all realize emptiness. We can realize Buddhahood. I can believe that there are people who've done it. That's fine. But what good will that do me in the end? Nothing.
Well, my point is that only a minority of Buddhists believe in this rule that you will be born out.
It's not a rule. What are you talking about? It's an observation of a yogi. But let them. Who cares if they... Belief is not the point, darling. What do you go about belief for? You don't talk about believing in relativity, do you? You don't say that, do you?
I can say I don't understand it.
Well, that's good because you haven't studied it. But what's the point here? What's your point?
My point is...
So where's the problem? Get to the problem. I can't get the problem clear yet.
The problem is that this teaching, I'll call it the 49 days.
It's one teaching in Vajrayana Buddhism.
Yeah. This is something that's propagated only by a minority.
But who cares? Excuse me, the minority of people on this planet have no idea about a mind. The minority of people don't think about Buddha's teachings. But why do you care who believes or not? It's not belief. I refuse to use that word. I will never use the word belief, ever. I say it's my working hypothesis. But you're an intelligent man. It's up to you to look into the different Buddhist philosophies. It's up to you to decide which one you'd like to take as your hypothesis so that you can practice and study it. That's your call.
Okay, that's fine.
That's the point. That's the real issue. Everybody might be wrong. Buddha might be some peanut. And as the Dalai Lama says, if you decide to take on board a certain Buddha's methodology, whatever it is, Theravada, Mahayana or Vajrayana, you know, and each step of the way you practice. Well, that means you practice. Practice means you experience the truth of it for yourself. Each step of the way, doesn't it? It has to be that, doesn't it? Eventually, you've got to experience the truth of it, don't you? If you're really practicing, it's got to come to you've got to come to a validation of it, don't you? Then each step of the way, if you're doing that, and you get to a certain point, the Dalai Lama says, and you prove that Buddha's wrong, then you must reject him. Of course you must. That's the difference between believing in Buddhism and engaging in it. That's the difference between believing in mathematics and engaging in it, and there's a massive difference between those two. And we're discussing here involved in it, practicing it. But to practice something, for you to practice wanting to prove relativity, you've got years of hard work, a lot of money involved. You better be confident you're on the right track, which means you do your research of Einstein, and you're confident and you're acting every step of the way from junior school to high school to university that that's your working hypothesis, that relativity is true. But you won't prove it till you get there, will you? Will you? Can you see my point?
I see that point.
That's the same as Buddhism. Identical. It's up to you to find out. Can you get that point?
I can get that point.
Well then, you're the boss, babe. These 49ers might be a load of rubbish.
They could be. Yeah.
They could be. But so can everything Buddha says. Excuse me. Don't be arrogant. Everything Buddha says could be rubbish. But it's up to you to engage in it and take it seriously as your methodology, as your hypothesis, until you've known it as your... I mean, as long as my mother tells me that 1 + 1 is 2, I'm happy. But if she says go buy 2 oranges and I've never practiced it, I'm lost. So believing it is one thing, that can be useful. But to know how to use it, I've got to engage in it. So it's for you to find out. And the other point is this. Use the example of acupuncture. You're living in an allopathic city called Zurich for 50 years ago. Who's heard of acupuncture? Nobody. Then some wacko Chinese person tells you put needles in people to heal. You'll get quite a shock. Well, the first response is, what a load of rubbish, isn't it? And then slowly you think you've got an open mind. You start going, well, I might look into this. And before you know it, you're starting to get a bit of confidence. Maybe acupuncture could be possible. You still haven't got a clue. But now you've got enough confidence to enter into learning it. So that means you're taking on board as your hypothesis the whole model called acupuncture. Now my point is this, and this is the same with Buddhism, or any body of knowledge. As you keep progressing, practicing, and actually learning it, I would say, with confidence, that if acupuncture is a valid system, not a random thing of put a needle here occasionally, but a genuine valid system, if Buddhism, Vajrayana, Mahayana, or Hinayana, or Theravada is a valid system, it has to be first coherent intellectually. And we've got to start with that. You can't do anything else. So it's one step at a time. Does that make sense?
Well, that makes sense.
Good. That's the approach that I'm taking here.
Okay.
Of course it might be wrong. But you can prove it intellectually. You can take that model. You can go study Tibetan medicine. And you can learn the theories of it. And they'll give you all the coherent answers because it's dealt with in massive depth in all the Vajrayana literature. And then you can eventually experience it being a yogi yourself. It's got to be coherent. It's got to fit with the rest of the whole picture. It can't just be some isolated weird trip, which is how we think of religion. Just some random thing from Revelation, Not like that. It's part of a system. So it's got to be coherent first intellectually. Do you see what I'm saying? And the Vajrayana is a really sophisticated model. I'm not trying to, sell it to you. There's masses of literature. The Tibetan medical doctors, they study that literature, all about that. That's their model. So it's a highly intellectual, highly sophisticated theoretical model of the universe and of the human body and of the life and of the universe and blah, blah, blah. It's very fascinating. I'm sure you'd enjoy it.
Yes, I
So why don't we finish on that interesting note? What's your name?
Tony.
Tony. Thank you, Tony. Okay, it's 5:15 anyway. What you planned? Okay, well I'm happy to be here for a day in Zurich. I like Zurich. So then we just think we've been here all day, all these thoughts, ideas, seeds being planted. Nothing goes astray, what it says. Everything's gone in. We don't remember 99% of it, but it doesn't matter. It's gone in. So we think maybe nourish these seeds we planted. Take from this any tools we feel are useful. We're the boss. To help develop our amazing potential for clarity and happiness and joy and less angry, less neurotic, more kind, more wise, for our sake and the sake of others, because we all live in this crazy planet together. And may compassion grow and grow in the hearts of all. Kewadin Yududar Lama Sangye Drugyune Droa Chikyang Malupa Dei Sada Passion. Janchuk Senchuk Rinpoche, Maki Param Keguchi, Ke Panya Pame Payang, Gomne Gomdu Elvasho.